Join us on the Path Radio Mix online. And to get there, type in thepathradio.com. That's thepathradio.com. And enjoy free streaming music all day long. That's it. thepathradio.com. All right, now let's get to the main show, the monthly social podcast with me, your host, Guido Perino, as you go on with Guido. Hello, everybody, and can you believe it? Welcome to the September 2021 Go On with Guido podcast edition. Incredible that we're 9 months into this year already and going strong. I got a great show for you today. I've got residential school survivor Jackie Fletcher. She's going to talk to us about that experience and enlighten us and provide some education there. I've got a fantastic musical guest in Chase Stevens, Ontario talent. You'll want to hear his couple of songs. I've got Kim. She's going to cover off for us being a frontline worker in the grocery store across the 4 waves of COVID-19. We're going to cover returning to school during COVID-19 here in Ontario through an article that I wrote. I've also got Laura from Living Young Design talking to us about painting and interior design, and she's got something special for you as well. And of course, the return of our For Fans Talk Sports. We're going to cover off Tony O, the passing of Tony Esposito. We're going to talk Olympics. We're going to talk mental health and sports. We're going to talk the cover of EA Sports and so much more. Again, full pack show. I really hope you enjoy it end to end. As always, there's something for everyone. Let's go. All right, before we get started today, I wanted to tell you a little bit about one of our Promote Ontario/Canada small businesses. Johnny Prosciutto, artisanal Italian homemade products. We make it like our grandfather, or as we say, Nonno. Naturally cured, old-fashioned, and delicious. The best part? We deliver straight to your front door. We offer free shipping when spending over $99. Order online at johnnyprosciutto.com and stay safe. And when you use the code GOGUIDO, you're going to save $25 off your entire order. That's the code GOGUIDO on johnnyprosciutto.com. I'd like to welcome to the podcast residential school survivor of the Missinaibi Cree First Nation, Jackie Fletcher. Jackie currently lives in Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario, Canada, and will talk to us about her experience living at the Shingwalk Residential School in Sault Ste. Marie. Her father also attended Shingwalk, as well as St. John's Residential School in Chapleau. Jackie, thank you for agreeing to share your story with me and our global listeners. How are you today?
I'm fine, thank you.
Thank you, Jackie. I'm fine too, and I'm looking forward to our chat. I have so many questions I want to ask you as I try to understand and unpack the whole residential school topic and impact to Indigenous people. And I will hopefully have the chance to get to those, as I'm sure the answers will fulfill the gaps in my curiosity. But I want to achieve a little bit more than that. I want to achieve education and a shared experience that will facilitate perhaps more true reflection of the past, of the self, and how to move forward. If I pause my questions for a moment and simply ask you, what is the first thing you want us to know as a survivor of the residential school system?
Okay, the most profound thing I want to tell you is that my father's siblings, 8 of them, and my 11 siblings all went to residential school. But when my younger sister and I went in 1959, we knew nothing about what we were going to experience. The rule of don't talk, don't trust, don't feel was cemented into their psyche very well. Even at the age of 85 in 1992, was my dad still silent. I never heard about residential school from any of my relatives. It was a complete shock to us when they wrenched my sister from my hand and dragged her away screaming and crying my name as they took her to the junior dorm and me to the intermediate dorm.
So don't talk, don't trust, don't feel. That to me doesn't sound like a very inspiring school model as your family gets separated, Jackie.
And that's what they instilled in the people, in the survivors.
So you attended the Shingwak Indian Residential School in Sault Ste. Marie. That residential school operated, I understand, from 1873 to 1970 by the Anglican Church of Canada and the Government of Canada. There's a site, the Parks Canada site, which I'll have the URL and I'll put it in the podcast notes for reference. It identifies the following. I want to read you something. It says, more than 1,000 Indigenous children from Ontario, Quebec, the Prairies, and the Northwest Territories attended this school. Whether they were there by choice or coercion, students were subject to a regimented daily routine that involved working to maintain the school while facing severe discipline and abuse, harsh labor, emotional neglect, inadequate nutrition, poor health care, and poor living conditions. Siblings remained separated by gender and age, to your point, Jackie, and Indigenous languages were forbidden. Many students spent their entire childhoods at the school. Some never returned home. The far-reaching effects of the residential school experience continue to have significant impact on former students, their families, and communities today. Again, none of that to me sounds like a school I'd want to attend willingly or be proud to attend. How old were you when you first went there, and how long were you there?
I was a little bit older than most kids who ever went. I was 14 when I went there. I was in Shingwak for 2 years, and then I was boarded out for 3 years to a private home where I was the housemaid, maintenance, indoors and outdoors. She not only got a private maid, but also was paid by the government to take care of my needs. It was basically a foster home and an extension of Shingwak. There was overcrowding so that the private homes became the answer.
I wasn't aware that this type of system was in place. How did you, if I may ask, how did you get picked to be boarded out? Like, was there a system for that?
It was all depending on what grade you were in. If you were in the higher grades, then you got boarded out because there was younger kids coming in.
Now, if I can ask too, when you say, you said they were paid by the government to take care of your needs, but how far did that really go, Jackie?
Well, they had to house us and provide a place for us to sleep and food to eat. But what had happened while I was in that home was that lady never ate with me, and I wasn't allowed to use any of her, like, washing machine or whatever. I'd do my own underwear and stuff.
So you were a bit unto yourself, even in that home?
All the time.
Yeah. Were you aware as a child that you were going to a residential school, or do you recall if your parents were aware? And if not, if you weren't aware, where did you think you were going when they took you?
Like I said earlier, I knew nothing of the residential school concept. I just knew I would be going to a place where I would sleep, eat, and go to school. My parents told me that the small railway community where we lived would never have good teachers, so I needed to go somewhere else for a good education. But I never got the detail of what residential school was all about.
So it sounds like, and correct me if I'm not understanding correctly, it sounds like the residential school was sold to your parents as something positive compared to what was available in the railway community. Is that what I'm hearing?
No, my dad went to residential school, so he knew all about it.
Oh.
Like I said, they never talked about it. They never talked about the bad things that went on. And so he just told me I was going to a school. He didn't say what or what kind or anything. That's how closed-minded, closed-mouthed they were. That's incredible.
And you may or may not know, was part of it just fear of the system or whatever was going on, or just...
They were threatened if they didn't send the kids to school, they would be jailed.
Really? So I'm processing as I listen to you tell me these things. Well, so what is your first recollection of how you felt arriving at the residential school?
I felt very disoriented, scared, confused, abandoned, strange, like I was in a twilight zone and I would wake up soon. Where were they taking my sister? Where am I going? Why did my parents leave us here? What's going to happen to us? Who are all these strange white people with unfriendly faces? What was going through my mind?
Your description makes me think of one of those movies where the character feels all disoriented as they wake up from a dream or maybe a nightmare, Jackie.
It was kind of like that. I didn't know if I was going to wake up or not. What's going to happen?
I can't imagine. It kind of gets. You said unfriendly. The way people with unfriendly faces, because they're probably looking at you and you're trying to process what's going on and you're not understanding it, right? For good reason.
Their faces were very stern. There was no smiling or nothing.
Wow. So let me ask this: Did the fact that it was run by the Anglican Church of Canada mean anything to you then or now?
At the time, I had no meaning to any of it. I just followed what others were doing until I knew the routine and accepted it, like praying every morning and night and before each meal and going to church almost all day on Sunday. I don't follow the church but respect others that do today. To me, religion is dogma taught by outsiders, whereas spirituality is personal and comes from within. I prefer spirituality. That's what I've learned in my lifetime.
I want to thank you for sharing that view because, for somebody to say that, it can be a very personal thing, especially when we start talking about spirituality. For a lot of people, for a lot of different reasons, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Now, Jackie, the Shingwalk Residential School was described as a self-sustaining one with an on-site farm. I understand the students attended class for half a day and then they worked around the school the other half a day. Did you have that experience, or if you didn't, what was your typical day like at the school there?
No, that practice was done away with by the time I got there. My day was chores as soon as you woke up. Go down to the cafeteria for whatever jobs that were required to do to prepare for breakfast, clean up after breakfast, walk to school for 9 and return back to Shingwalk at 3. Homework and maybe some recreation time before preparation for supper. After supper, we could go to the recreation room for an hour and play games or just hang out. I was in a room with 36 girls, so when you went to your dorm, the only place you could go was your bed after an evening shower and prayers. But went out, so we couldn't even read. Instructions and jobs were told to us for the next day. Every night they would tell us what we were going to do. There was always a process.
It's incredible that you recall some of that routine and process. One of the things that sticks out that you just said was that there was always someone around.
Yeah.
You never really had much time alone, and that even when you went to your own bed, you still had 35 other people next to you, sort of, right?
And they were next to you, like 2 feet apart.
Oh. So
the bed, 36 beds in one dorm. Can you imagine? An army barracks.
Wow.
And there was always supervisors hanging around and watching what you were doing.
All night?
They would come and check every 2-3 hours.
Wow. So I understand that there's at this school there were approximately 120 graves of students and staff. The majority of the student graves are unmarked because the wooden crosses deteriorated over the years. But I also understand that the staff and church officials had received headstones. Now, the unidentifiable or gone wooden ones, they were for children. By chance, do you remember that grave site, or did you know anyone in it?
I remember the grave site because we used to go there after church sometimes and do some prayers there, but I didn't know anyone buried there or any unmarked graves.
So there's a monument there that was put up in 1988, and it was put up to honor those who were buried there. It includes a list of the known deceased, but not all. And I'm saying that on purpose because they don't know everybody that is in buried in that cemetery. Does that monument mean anything to you or the First Nations community?
I did not have anyone that I know of deceased in the cemetery, and I'm not sure about my community. The only time my First Nation talked about residential school was when I and a co-worker initiated a video project called Healing Journey Home, where we interviewed survivors and second-generation people to talk about what they knew. I did know that one survivor and her family came from Walpole Island to Shinwalk every year in the spring to clean the cemetery. They had family buried there. That's about all I know about that.
It sounds, with respect to the video, it sounds like you made a bit of your own monument that has some meaning. Is that video, which you said it's called Healing Journey Home, is that something only for your community, or have you shared that with others as well?
It's only for the community right now, but I'm trying to get it put on. I forget now the technology word to use to get it to play it on a website.
Right.
I hope to get that done, but I have to get approval from the community.
Well, if there's anything I can do to help that, then we'll explore that offline. Jackie, staying with the school history for a moment, I referenced the Parks Canada website earlier, and it also says this, and I want to read this to you. Since the closure of the school in 1970, the site has been a place of cultural reclamation and education. For decades, Algoma University, Shingwak Kinumaj Gamig. I think that's what it interprets into Shingwak University, if I said that correctly.
Mm-hmm.
The Children of Shingwak Alumni Association and their partners have been committed to the restoration of the true intent and spirit of Shingwak Waknisi's vision. Did I say that correctly, or you want to correct me? Thank you. Cross-cultural education and learning, and their reinterpretation of the site as a place for healing and reconciliation. When you hear or read that, does that matter in the overall journey? Is it now, and can it ever be a place of healing and reconciliation, Jackie?
I have a better understanding of what Chief Shingwak's vision is now since I did my own analysis. When he talked about cross-cultural education and training, I know in my heart that he meant the non-native people would learn our ways since we were in total immersion of their ways ever since I was born. The present president, Alzima Vesna, is very open to learning our ways and has brought on a spiritual advisor from the Ojibwe people in Garden River. She makes sure ceremony is a priority for anything. For example, hiring of new people, special occasions to do with the university, like installation of chancellor, and special days that mark the university life. So we're very, very pleased to be working with her.
I'm happy to hear that the school seems to be in a fail-forward transition where better things are happening. I briefly attended that location in my first year of university, and at the time, without all of the knowledge of the history, which I can't believe still, that I have now, and I've said to you in our exchanges that there were times when I was there that something just felt a little different, but I could never explain it, Jackie.
When I said to you, it's the spirits that were speaking to you.
Right.
That's what I believe.
Yeah, I think when you said, I got chills when you said that too. So, listen,
people say that when they come to tour the university.
Really?
They get some kind of signals or some kind of energy.
As we talk about the residential school in Sault Ste. Marie, I'm struggling with something. I'm struggling with why it took confirmation of the mass grave in Tk'emlúp to Shewempek to bring the residential school situation to the public's attention. I say, surely, if there was awareness in Sault Ste. Marie, I want to imagine there was awareness at other ones. In your opinion or knowledge, why do you think it took that event to get the acknowledgement started again? Because like when I do my research, this is something that has been suspected and often confirmed for a long time.
Well, that's how government and the church works. If no one says anything, then leave it alone. Look at how they destroyed records or chalked it up to privacy issues so they didn't have to hand out anything. The topic of hard evidence came forth is when everyone started talking and could no longer be covered up. Now the stories are coming out of young boys who are elders now, who had to dig graves but never knew who was going in them, or were sworn to secrecy, or children who went missing and was never heard from again. Genocide is alive and well, and this is proof.
I can't imagine as a young boy having to dig a grave for someone and all those years passing without knowing who it was for, or perhaps even knowing what you were doing at the time.
And they knew who it was for, some of them, and they weren't allowed to say anything.
Right. See, what you were saying earlier, there was some code of silence, right?
Yes, for sure.
Now, those memories, those thoughts, although being told not to talk about them, I can't imagine there's something that just passes, not even with time, like these memories must stick with those folks or have stuck with those folks for a long, long time.
There's a lot of triggering going on nowadays.
Because the conversations are happening more publicly.
And people are having mental health issues surfacing now more than ever.
What was your first reaction when you heard about the mass grave acknowledgement in Tushawempek, and how is that event viewed in your First Nation community?
I wasn't shocked when I first heard, because the TRC talked about 5,000 children missing. As a matter of fact, I felt warmth in my heart because the children's spirits came to us in their way to solidify the atrocity that has been done to our people, and by showing us through their bones. Like I said, spirit is very strong and they speak loudly. I feel sad for the families who may have lost their children to this cover-up, and I pray they find answers.
So, Jackie, for folks who are wondering, the TRC is defined through the Government of Canada as the Truth and Reconciliation Commission.
Yes, and there was 98 resolutions that they put forth.
Right, and it's supposed to provide those directly or indirectly affected by the legacy of the Indian residential school system with an opportunity to share their stories and experiences. Is it doing that, Jackie?
That's what I'm not sure where that all sits right now.
Yeah.
And I wanted your podcast maybe to help with that. We'll talk about that a little bit later.
Yeah, I'm hoping so too. I do, by the way, and you said, there's some sadness. I feel sad for those families too. And that event, if I can share with you, that event is what actually spawned my journey to understand more about this, which I guess has led me to my discussion with you as well. I've read many stories now, it seems, where children had their identity stripped from them in the form of taking away their Indigenous culture.
Yeah.
In what ways did that happen to you? And do you recall how you felt at that time, if you're willing to share that with us?
I really miss the forest, or bush bathing, I call it, where you're walking in the bush, smelling the smells, hearing the sounds, being on and in the water, eating fresh meat, fresh fish, moose meat, beaver, partridge, rabbits, hazelnuts, pincherries, raspberries, blueberries, chokecherries, and strawberries. Hearing my dad whistling while he was fishing or making a shore lunch. Hearing my parents and my grandmother talking Cree and laughing, even though I couldn't understand everything they said. I felt torn from everything familiar. I didn't experience any of this while I was in residential school.
Those are, and while you lost that, and I'm thinking those are some wonderful memories, especially that of your father and your family.
Yeah.
Those to me, you make me think of of some of the, my grandfather and things that I experienced growing up. And I just think that those are just some of the things that make up the fabric of our heritages. And to have those things taken away is at the core of our growth.
Definitely.
Jackie, do you have anger that you and your family went through those specific events, but then also had to live through so many years, or denial by others, or have you reached any level of forgiveness?
I've dealt with the experience through healing, but I know at times I get triggered. I now have Parkinson's, and I attribute that affliction with the trauma I've been through, which includes the residential school. I continue to work with the Children of Shingwak Alumni Association on a volunteer basis since 1991 to get the awareness of that era to as many people as possible. I'm not sure about forgiveness because taking of children is still very real by governments. Example, the Children Aid Society, they still take our children away from the communities.
Right.
I'm not sure if I'm ready to forgive anybody yet.
You have turned your attention, though, to your experiences in helping others through this.
Definitely.
Yeah.
That's why I stay with the Children of Shingwak Alumni.
Are you...
We need to tell as many people as we can about our experience.
Are you, if I can ask, are you angry at the church as an institution, regardless of the denomination?
I'm angry at the level of denial that is still being purported. If they were truly sorry, change would be happening in our communities. Example, clean water, affordable and standardized housing, and reasonable food prices. The incarceration rate of Indigenous people is off the charts. Once that starts to change noticeably, then maybe full forgiveness will happen. The church and government created this mess together, so they need to clean it up together.
You bring up several other topics that are important today, including clean water and the ability for perhaps an integrated system where there's inclusion of Indigenous people in the governance for Indigenous people to maybe even help overcome some of those challenges, right, Jackie?
Well, they keep saying they want to do better.
Yeah.
Well, let's hope we can do better if we notice those changes.
What if any messages do you have for those who are destroying church artifacts or statuses and buildings and things like that?
I don't think it's a good thing to do that because it is the evidence and history of our plight that is being destroyed. Put your energy into truth extraction by keeping the government and churches accountable. And there's many ways to do that.
Yeah, that's very simple and well said. Jackie, when you meet someone like me who's trying to understand what exactly happened and why, and doesn't perhaps know how to change history because I can't change history, what should we be doing? How do I or other people make a difference moving forward, imagining that we can move forward?
Keep holding podcasts with this topic and invite politicians and clergy to answer what they are doing to make things better. Get them to do a regular podcast with answers as to how they're addressing the TRC recommendations without the assertion of a red herring. Don't let the momentum die.
Thanks, Jackie. Hey, I'll do my best to continue providing a forum for education on inclusion and diversity and culture and more. That will continue to be possible with guests like yourself that are willing to do this and share their story and have the conversation, which is something I'm very thankful for. Look, when we began this discussion today, I asked you how you wanted to start. I said, what do you want to tell us first? And I want to conclude it, if I can, with Jackie, what do you want to say in closure for us to remember and reflect on? What do you want to leave us with?
The impact is and will be felt with many generations. We need to ask for resources to hold cultural ceremonies, build cultural centers, provide mental health service free of charge, and make sure curriculum in all schools is taught from an Aboriginal lens. We judge our successes in life based on colonial benchmarks. It makes me laugh when I think about that because my niece lives in the bush for the last 15 years. I would like to see educators do an immersion course with her and be graded on what they have learned.
Well, I hope some decision makers are listening to this. Your knowledge has foundation, your words have genuine substance, and your thoughts are authentic, Jackie.
Well, I appreciate you giving me the time to talk about this.
No,
Sometimes I get very angry about the whole thing, and I hope I was respectful.
Beyond respectful, Jackie. You've given us insights and information that we can all take away and learn from. And I can't thank you enough. The pleasure has been and honor has been all mine. And I hope that the segment generates some interest and we continue to educate people.
Keep me informed if you're getting interest.
I definitely will. So, folks, there you have it. Jackie Fletcher, a Canadian residential school survivor and now educator. Thank you for being a guest on the podcast and sharing your story, Jackie. It was an honor and privilege. I can't imagine that it's easy to relive some of these memories. Thank you for doing that. I hope that you continue to, however, use your experiences to educate people and have them better understand how we can move forward together. And perhaps you can come back at another time and we can see if any progress has been made, Jackie.
Thank you, Guido, and thank you for giving me the time to speak about this. Thanks,
Jackie. You take care.
Bye.
There's a lot going on right now in my community, province, country, and worldwide with respect to the fourth wave of COVID-19. In a few moments, I'm going to read to you an article that I wrote on August 8th of this year and that you can read and reference yourself on my site, guidoperino.com/blog, called So, What's the Plan? COVID-19 and Returning to School in Ontario. I'm not reading it because I want to convince you to change your mind on COVID-19, and I'm not even reading it to you as perhaps the host of this podcast. I'm reading it to you as a parent because, like many of my guests of this podcast who have lived experiences that we relate to in different ways, so too does this provide what I am experiencing as a parent and what many other parents have been experiencing this summer along with their kids, especially those who are ineligible to be vaccinated. I understand that everyone's personal situation and beliefs can certainly be different. I also understand that as a co-parent of a child who's not eligible for vaccination, and as a parent who would choose to vaccinate their child, it's heart-wrenching to not be able to protect the child in every way possible. Surely, some will say, well, just keep your child at home. It's not that simple, though. You see, if we keep the child home, they get put into a virtual school, a school that has no one they're familiar with, none of their schoolmates. Once they're in that virtual school, they can't be switched into an in-person school until February 2022. So, I would be helping their physical safety, but challenging their mental health in a negative way, which is slowly taking a toll on all children, and mine are asking to go back to be with their friends. If we send the kids in, the province has not yet mandated the vaccine for all educators, staff, and students, and so the risk exposure increases. Interestingly, if we send them in and the schools go into remote learning, in that scenario, they will be with their classmates in the hybrid model that the province used halfway through last year when they couldn't supply the virtual schools with appropriate educators. All that aside, we have the science table and examples across the world telling us that the unvaccinated are the most vulnerable to the current virus. We currently have 1.1 million children under 12 unvaccinated in Ontario. The article I wrote explored the statistics on August 8th in comparison to last year, among other areas of concerns of a parent, or this parent may have. So what's the plan? COVID-19 and returning to school in Ontario. There's been no shortage of information on COVID-19 when it comes to societal beliefs on its origins, intentions, motivations, vaccine conspiracies and benefits, impact on politics, economics, education, health and medical services, and science, among other elements in our communities. With all those facets, separating facts from fiction has been a challenge, especially when using social media as a source. A scan of online exchanges also quickly reveals that the likelihood of converting an opinion on any side of the COVID-19 spectrum is highly unlikely, as heels seem firmly ensconced in whatever has influenced that primary belief. There are, however, some indisputable facts that must be considered when looking at the somewhat loosely published Return to School Education Plan in Ontario, Canada, that seems to ignore some basic pandemic knowledge and data. According to the Government of Ontario, references ontario.ca, as of August 6, 2021, there have been 551,678 cases and 9,932 COVID deaths in Ontario. 19,764,199 Ontarians have been vaccinated, and of that, 71.21% have had their first dose and 62.42% are fully vaccinated from a pool of 24,045,831 delivered doses for an 82.2% consumption against vaccine availability. From an education perspective, the Government of Ontario last reported on July 5th, 2021, their statistics for the conclusion of the school year. That report showed that there were 15,292 total cases, which accounts for 3% of all provincial cases in this school year. The breakdown of those cases included 11,462 students, 2,661 staff, and 1,169 remained unidentified. Considering that from April 19th through to June 30th, schools were operating remotely, during which time there were 260 cases made up of 120 students and 140 staff through on-site special needs students, staff, and school boards, that means most cases occurred in a short 7-month span at a rate of 1,600 per month. According to Public Health Ontario, the cumulative rate dating back to January 15th, 2020 is much higher for children who make up 18.7%, that's 17 years old or younger, of the overall population, accounting for 10.8% of confirmed COVID-19 cases reported in Ontario. With 2 summers' worth of data to compare and consider, it provides further opportunity for consideration. On August 4th, 2020, we had 91 cases for 0.62 cases per 100,000 and a 7-day average of 103 cases, or 0.71 per 100,000, with 4 new deaths. A year later, on August 4th, 2021, we had 139 cases, 0.95 cases per 100,000, and the 7-day average was 199 cases, or 1.37 per 100,000, with 11 new deaths. That's 48 more cases, a higher 7-day average of 96, and 7 more deaths. Considering that we've had several months of vaccination, an upward trend in new cases in the summer of 2021 is consistent with that of the summer 2020 around the same time. And it's important to remember that there's still 30 to 40% of the population unvaccinated. With 4 weeks to the start of the school and a vaccination rate that isn't near the 80 to 90% needed for desired herd immunity, coupled with an education plan that is thin on proven pandemic protocols, it's hard to ignore concern among parents for unvaccinated children and other friends and family in the education system. The exposure risk remains high for unvaccinated children who are under the age of 12, as junior kindergarten to grade 6, as they made up approximately 92% of elementary school students in Ontario at an approximate population count of 1,131,656 from a total of 1,425,145. While there has only been one reported death in children, there remains an unknown understanding of what long-term effects COVID-19 may have on them, which is compounded by the fact they are the largest asymptomatic, that's silent carriers and distributors of the virus group, at approximately 27.2%. On August 3rd, 2021, the Government of Ontario released their back-to-school plan addressing COVID-19. Depending on what view you have of the pandemic and protective measures, it's plausible to surmise that the plan seems to lack clarity or possible consideration for what is statistically known in Ontario or from the global community about next steps in battling a possible fourth wave. For instance, the vaccine has not been deemed a mandatory requirement for educators, and so there is an instant breach of health security that allows for them to be a virus gateway into the school environment. While the plan leverages the use of masks indoors as students and teachers are grouped in cohorts, it falls short of ensuring the mixing of cohorts outdoors and during other activities with loose language like encouraged, as it allows for close engagements to happen and unmasked while doing so. The further compromise through extracurricular activity allows for elementary and secondary health and physical education classes, including high and low contact activities. Logic seems to be a further challenge as music programs are allowed indoors. Singing and playing wind instruments is allowed indoors with adequate ventilation and when physical distancing within a cohort is possible. It seems there is little regard for a virus that, according to the Government of Canada Prevention and Risk Documentation, spreads from an infected person to others through respiratory droplets and aerosols, smaller droplets, created when an infected person talks, sings, shouts, coughs, or sneezes. As a measure of helping the air quality, the Ontario Minister of Education has announced a bag of money to secure HEPA filters for classrooms, although it's unclear what the requirement or effect of such units will be to mitigating how the virus is transmitted, especially given the relaxing of social distancing in the classroom and unchanged reduction in their size. While the plan is heavy with recommendations, it often defies logic as it potentially contradicts reasonable measures with ones that negate them. While recommendations are published online by the Government of Ontario, it is clear that the plan remains incomplete as of August 8, 2021, through their own admission for the management of COVID-19 in schools on the COVID-19 Health and Safety Operational Guidance for Schools 2021-2022, as it reads, "This section is forthcoming and will build on the operational guidance COVID-19 management in schools from the 2020-21 school year." Let that sink in. A key part of the plan is forthcoming, with less than 4 weeks to the start of the school year, which is arguably inexcusable given almost 2 years' worth of experience, knowledge, and data. Regardless of where you sit on the beliefs of COVID-19, much of our society wants to see children back in school in as much of a normal environment as possible. And there's a way to do that by leveraging lessons learned that both protects the total health and well-being of students and all staff using more logical and proven measures. There are avoidable gaps and waste in the plan that can render several measures ineffective and leaves exposure and risk unnecessarily high, while not addressing how it will handle outbreaks, student self-isolation cases, and possible closures. Whatever the next steps are, you must feel for educators, parents, and students heading into this school year as they collectively, literally, and figuratively hold their breath to see where on the dartboard this all lands. This is, of course, an opinion article by me, Guido Perino, and you can read the article in its entirety on guidoperino.com in the blog section. All right, after a couple of heavy topics there, let's take a little break and have a listen to some of our business friends, and then we'll get into some music.
Hi, I'm Richard Chase, introducing Chaser's Fresh Juice, a local business in Toronto. We've been in business for over 20 years, initially supporting our local Toronto area and now servicing all of Canada. Chaser provides fresh organic juices, ingredients including citrus zests, dehydrated garnishes, and fresh citrus peels. to enhance any cocktail or recipe you can think of. We have successfully supplied restaurants, distilleries, craft breweries, and bakeries across the country. Reach out to orders@chasersjuice.com for any questions you may have. We are a customized fresh juice company, and I'm sure we can help you. Thank you.
Recipes at My Table is a work of family, love of food, and sharing of stories. The stories keep the memories alive and make every day a party in my kitchen. Join me for the sharing of traditional Italian recipes and so much more. Visit me at www.recipesatmytable.com.
I'd like to welcome to the podcast musical artist Chase Stevens. Chase is a Greater Toronto Area talent who has been on the scene for the past 8 years and a frequent flyer to Nashville, where he is a member of the Nashville Songwriters Association, where the bulk of his latest project was recorded. He is here with me today to help introduce a couple of his songs. Welcome, Chase. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, and thanks so much for having me on today.
The pleasure is mine, and it will be the listeners when they hear these tunes. They are some fantastic songs. I'd like to kick things off talking about one of your songs called Even Now. Chase, can you give us a little bit of a lowdown on the song and maybe what or who it was about?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, one of the things that I love about music is that it has that power or ability to, as soon as you hear a certain song, it can take you right back to time, maybe back to an old relationship or a special event, whatever the case happens to be. And we all have songs that do that. And for me, one of those songs is Night Moves by Bob Seger. And I love that tune. When people ask me what my favorite song is of all time, that is the first one that almost always comes to mind. So I wanted to write a song that talked a little bit about music being able to transcend people back in time like that. And I also wanted to pay tribute to Bob Seger, who I'd seen a couple times in concert as well. And I think he's an amazing songwriter and performer. So I sat down and started to work on that tune. And then I brought a friend of mine in to help out with some of the lyrics on there, a guy named Terry Fernio. And so we polished that song off and, So
you're getting a little bit sorry, Chase, you're getting a little bit into the process. And I wanted to know, what went into writing that tune? I mean, not just lyrically, but, collaborating with other folks. And, I consider myself a music hobbyist because I don't think I'm that talented, but I just, play around with guitars and things like that. But I'm always more of okay, I'm going to write the lyrics and then I'm going to see if I could write some chords to it. But what went into it for you as you collaborated?
Well, typically my songwriting process is I will pick up a guitar and just kind of start playing around with some chords and maybe looking for a melody or a rhythm or something like that. Sometimes I know what I want to write about when I sit down to write. Other times I don't. And you're just kind of looking for a little bit of that, burst of inspiration or that stream of consciousness to kind of get the ball rolling. So, and then that's, pretty much the same process with this particular tune. I didn't write the melody first or the lyrics or so on. But by the time I brought in Terry to help out with the lyrics, I did have the music that had been written at that point. And I just I had hit a bit of a wall with lyrics. I thought, okay, I don't really know how to finish this song off or where we're going to go with it. So that's typically when I will do some co-writing, because I don't do a ton of co-writing. I know these days, especially down in Nashville, everybody writes. You see very few songs written by one person these days. So I'm a little bit of an anomaly in that way because I do most of my writing just as a solo writer.
Right.
But if I hit a roadblock and I like the tune, then I'll bring somebody in to help me finish it off.
So now, when you do the co-writing thing, do you ever get to that point where you say, well, the word "the" doesn't fit there or "it" doesn't fit there? Like, does it ever get to that point, or is it fairly at a higher level than that?
No, it does get that way. It's. The co-writing is a very interesting process as well because it's a very vulnerable process. When I'm sitting down writing by myself, I'm singing a bunch of nonsense words that don't make sense, the lines, because you're kind of fishing, you're feeling your way through. And to do that when you're working with somebody else is a little, can be a little bit intimidating. So, you want to write with people who understand that process, and there's no ego involved. You can't get offended if somebody says, well, that just doesn't really,
Right.
that doesn't cut it for me. So you have to kind of put all that aside and just really open yourself up to going back and forth and,
And maybe
looking for the best lines you can.
Maybe where they also can help you take the song where, your idea was at first and sort of meeting you there or trying to get there, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes you'll find during that process that the song will go in a different direction that you didn't really think about. And that's one of the strengths of co-writing, because you are bringing in, that other talent to help you take it somewhere where, where the song wants to go that you may not have taken it if you had worked on it on your own. So
Chase, let's switch gears here for with me for a little bit. From that process, what's your favorite part of performing? Are there plans? What's your favorite part of performing? And then are there plans in the post-pandemic world to start doing that again? Or?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've recently played in a couple of festivals in the last month, and that was it was amazing to actually get out and start playing live again, because it'd been I guess the last performance part of that was March in 2020, so it'd been almost a year and a half that I'd played live. So that felt so good to do that. I co-host a series of songwriter nights out in Oakville with a friend of mine named Paul Melissa, and we are starting those back up very soon as well. So we do have some plans to get back out, and I think we're going to look for another venue as well, so we can even do more songwriter nights. The thing I love about performing is when you play a song that you've written, and especially let's say it's a sad song or something like that, and it really touches somebody, or whatever song, as long if you've written something that really touches somebody in some way, and you can see that when you're performing, or they come up to you after you've played it and they express that sentiment to you, that's an incredibly rewarding experience.
Yeah, and especially if they're singing it with you and they know the lyrics, and right.
Yeah, absolutely. And people request things. One of my songs that gets requested the most is a really, really sad song about a Canadian soldier. The song's called HWR. That was on my last album. And it's a very sad song, but I get more requests to play that song than anything else.
So we're going to listen to, the first song we're going to listen to is Even Now. That's what we've been talking about. And I'm super happy that you're sharing your music with us. So let's get to that. Let's have a listen to Chase Stevens, where a little spark becomes a flame, with his song called Even Now, as he takes us to our own little town and gets to the heart of the matter. There's a lot of foreshadowing in there, folks. Here is Chase Stevens.
Sitting around listening to some old Bob Seger tunes, your memory flew across my mind. I still remember when we became more than friends. Radio was playing Hollywood nights. Funny that it's still the same when I think of your name. The little spark becomes a flame, and I think about how much I miss those days. Loving that those songs only need just a few minutes. Take me back in time, put me right back in it. That little town where it all went down. Ooh, and those lines that hit at the heart of the matter, reeling in the memories that had long been scattered. Too quick to turn the page, we just walked away, but the songs remind me how it hurts a little bit even now. Ran against the wind, messed up what could have been, looking for what we couldn't find. We were wild and free, a little too young to see that all we needed was a little more time. We had nothing left to prove, just living our truth, shooting stars passing through, getting by on our own night moves. Loving that those songs only need just a few minutes. Take me back in time, where it all went down. Ooh, and those lines that hit at the heart of the matter, reeling in the memories that had long been scattered. Too quick to turn the page, we just walked away. But the songs remind me how it hurts a little bit even now. Even now. Even now, I wish I could change that famous final scene. Loving that the songs only need just a few minutes. Take me back in time, put me right back in it. That little town where it all went down. Ooh, and those lines that hit at the heart of the matter, reeling in the memories that had long been scattered. Too quick to turn the page, we just walked away. But I made it through somehow. It hurts a little bit even now. Even now. Even now.
Wow, that is a hot country track by Canadian Chase Stevens. Stick around because he's going to give us one more song a little bit later in the show. Now, I'd like to welcome to the podcast Kimberly. Kimberly has been and is a frontline worker, helping to ensure that we can have continued access to food as she serves us at one of our Ontario grocery stores. And it's been a real challenge, I think, through the pandemic. But we have some questions for her, and she's here to answer those today. Kimberly, thank you for joining us on the Go On With Guido podcast. How are you today?
Thank you so much, first of all, Guido, for inviting me on. I am a listener, so thank you for having me. And I am well today. Thank you.
That's awesome. Thanks for listening too.
Yes.
So, Kim, you're one of the folks that we keep hearing about throughout this pandemic. Considered sometimes, and if I could do air quotes, the other front line at the grocery stores where you help serve the public. You provide an essential service as we come to buy our food. Now, while a lot of us have been at home, you've been out there. To me, it's out there because I'm not out there. So were you at all during that time worried about interacting with people throughout this pandemic?
Yes. So just to give you a little bit of how it happened for me as an individual. So we got an email regarding COVID, and then the second email was basically to tell us that one of our own team members unfortunately contracted COVID. I had heard about it on my way to work. So I was petrified, quite honestly, to enter the building knowing that one of my team members had contracted COVID.
So this is at the very beginning.
It was right at the beginning. She was, I think, case number 2 in the area. And so it got publicized. And it was extremely stressful to put on a smile then, knowing that we couldn't talk about it till it became public. And we had to, hi, how are you? Thank you. How's your day going? Do our professional greeting and engagement, all the while being petrified, not knowing, because nobody knew what this COVID was.
And at the time, you didn't have any measures. Like, there's no masks. You're not sanitized. Like, it's just the regular stuff, right? Like the regular cleaning. And
that day, so the company I worked for actually was one of the front runners of using PPE. So we were the first in the grocery industry, to my knowledge, in Ontario, to wear it to be mandatory to wear masks and or shields at that time.
So that happened right away. You had the case
Right
that happened
away,
and you're
as
in
soon
there.
as one of our team members, and honestly, that was immediately soon after the announcement of this COVID in the area. So I have been wearing a mask basically since first week or second week of March of when it all began. When did it begin? 2020?
Yeah.
Yes.
2020, yeah,
So
March.
I was, and then soon after, team members began to take leave. So 1/3 of the staff was operating the entire store.
Wow. So you lost 2/3 of the staff
Due to fear, because of that one person being diagnosed.
But you were still going in.
Yes. And in fact, myself and another team member were running the Starbucks. So we were working open to close for about 2 months. Me and one other team member for that department.
Wow.
So we did it not for the public, really. I'm going to be transparent. We did it for our staff, our remaining staff, so that we could push through and work numerous departments. And many worked open to close and or numerous departments simultaneously.
Now,
so that our store could provide food for the community.
Now, do you, and I don't know if you know this, you may or may not, do you think this was happening elsewhere, like where everybody became so understaffed at the grocery stores and these areas that provided these services, or was it just unique to your area?
No, definitely. I think not only say the grocery industry, but hospitality. I'm sure once there was like cases documented and publicized, people that were working, say, in hospitality, hotels, restaurants in particular, and grocery. Of course, medical, like we're separating because, of course, thank you so much for all those, the medical industry, right? Of every capacity from paramedics and everybody. But the separate secondary sector, the hospitality and food industry, yes, I would say within the first couple of weeks, those industries were hit by people going on leave due to fear, right?
Well, so now
and due to medical pre-existing conditions, like I have asthma and epilepsy,
right?
I could have used, I could have done that as well, but I chose for myself to work, and nobody judged anyone. I want to make that clear. We all understood. We all each individually had our choice. Nobody was made to feel like in my particular chain, the store that the company I worked for basically said, you need to do what's best for yourself and or your family members. And that truly, they stood by that.
So it's good that you had that support. But I want to ask, so your initial fear, and then you say to me, well, but I also had these underlying conditions, but I also stayed and was one of the ones that did open to close. Did you overcame that fear, or you just lived with it?
Well, I was going through another life transition at the same time. So financially, I just wanted to ensure stability for my child and I. Right. So for myself, I chose with the communication with my direct reports that decision could change if I decided. And I had full support. I had full support that if I decided to tap out, perfect. We would just do what we needed to do. What I ended up doing was to have extra mask-free day. I worked longer shifts so I could still retain my wage that I was used to. And as well, we did get increased wage, like essential worker, additional compensation through the government and as a blend, our employer as well. And so I just knew my gear for myself, my own inner compass. And there was times where I did leave earlier because I was exhausted breathing through the mask for 12 hours, 10 hours, you know. And then there was times where I was like, I need a 4-day weekend because my breathing, like I'm exhausted.
So you made a decision. There was obviously some risk in your decision making, but you had circumstances that you were dealing with. And I think that's, I think there were several people in those types of circumstances. Now,
definitely,
we've been through 3 waves of the pandemic so far. It seems that we're in a 4th. Has there been a difference for you between them in terms of process at the store or how people approach you? Or has any one of the waves felt safer than the other as you're serving the public?
So I'll just do by sections, by waves, if that's okay.
Yeah, of course.
So wave 1, I was petrified. I was on adrenaline and exhaustion.
Right.
And I just was literally, I'm here. I'm just going to do it. And, there's times that we almost passed out due to heat exhaustion. And just, because it was a hot summer as well. I don't know if you remember.
It was.
But it was a very hot summer.
Yeah.
So to have to wear a mask and then have asthma, compromised lung and all that. So some days were more challenging than others. I would say wave 1 on every level was taxing for me. Wave 2, more frustrating because every day there seemed to be amendment to policy and procedure and regarding sanitation and or protective equipment to be wearing. So that was it was an irritant. I'm not gonna lie. Wave 2, wave 3, and I don't know what this means psychologically, but it almost became a norm. Like now I almost feel anxious not wearing a mask. So on my days off, I rarely go out in public because I'm so, that's extra time that I'm not wearing a mask.
Right. The precautions have become normalized for you.
Yes, to the point where when I'm with people that on the flip side have been home a lot, they'll say to me, Kim, you don't need to wear your mask like inside. And I'm like, I'm so used to wearing it now. It's almost become a security blanket. I have it on my face. I feel a little more secure. So
have people
talked about that?
Have people approached you differently in the different ways? Like has the behavior of the public coming in seeking service from you changed from the first, like within the first 3 waves?
Yes.
Better.
Wave 1.
Yeah.
Wave 1, it was more mayhem. Everybody taking the paper towels, toilet paper, fighting over things like that. To giving us gift cards, clapping for us, thank you. Really being appreciative that we were working because our regulars started to see, it's the same people every day. They started doing the math that, Kimberly, why are you working 3 departments? Like I saw you at Starbucks, now I see you at cash, and now I see you at the bakery.
Right.
So they started doing the math. They seemed a little bit more thank you, which was lovely. We had people, giving us gift cards and children writing us thank you notes, which was lovely. Wave 2, still people being patient, waiting in lines. The division of people complaining about wearing a mask versus not was a little bit closer to even. Because wave 1, people were really angry of having to wear a mask.
Right.
And it was interesting that they felt that they should tell a person that was wearing one for 12 hours how upset they were about wearing a mask for 15 minutes. That was interesting. Wave 3, let's just say the clapping has stopped. It has kind of returned to normal, good, bad, and ugly.
I see. Pre-pandemic
Right.
service behavior,
Right.
with expectations and whatnot.
I will say most of us are grateful for the plexiglass because people can't throw things at us.
Right. Now, so plexiglass, do you feel safe? Did you feel safer in wave 3 than you did in wave 1?
So again, we were at the forefront. We had plexiglass. We were the first grocery chain to have plexiglass.
Right.
So wave 1, we had that. Wave 1, we had masks. It was mandatory, and we had plexiglass. And in most departments. And wave 1 at the cash registers for the customer and the individual cashier. Wave 2, we had plexiglass between, like, dividers between, like, the social distancing became more important. So the plexiglass between individual cashiers occurred then for wave 2, if I were, the timeline.
Right.
I feel like that's, and so wave 3 became, now we have to wear goggles or eye gear, plus the mask and or shield. And 6 feet the distance in each department, which was a challenge, is a challenge.
So it sounds like throughout, and in your particular case that you're sharing with us today, your safety, you had safety, like in terms of protection and the things that was made available to you to protect you from the virus and things like that, of what we knew during these waves.
Right. And I will say, my own individual experience, and I only speak on that, yes, I felt as safe as one could be with an unknown pandemic.
Right.
I felt the safest I could be in such a situation.
Now, you mentioned, so we're talking pandemic safety. Were there any incidents in the store as they were related to some of the people that came in that maybe you didn't feel safe about, like that, or that your safety would be compromised based on either their behavior or something that they were doing that, pushed or challenged even all the measures that you were taking or their behavior? Did you have anything like that happen during the pandemic?
So do you mean last week? I'd say yes. No, and I wish I was joking. It becomes that whole debate, anti-masking, anti-vaccination versus those that wear it, etc. We clearly put on our doors on all social media, radio, television, etc., print. This is what we're doing. We welcome our guests, but this is what we are doing and what we're asking for. So it's surprising to me that people still were surprised at the expectation of mandatory mask wear. Mm-hmm. So that occurred throughout always, and I was being cheeky, but I'm being truthful. We had an issue last week, and the person was very defiantly verbally expressing the right not to. And then, just kind of really loudly presented themselves from department to department to let us know they were not wearing one.
So what do you do in that scenario?
You be professional. Personally, it's offensive to me. Again, I think you should know your audience.
Right.
I'm wearing a mask sometimes 13 hours so that your family can provide food, can have food. No, know your audience.
How about the other patrons that were nearby this individual? Did they have a reaction as well, or?
Yes. Yes. It went. Some were shocked. Some did the shake of the head, like, "Are you kidding me?" And some went and verbalized. Do you think this appropriate? These people worked here for you, and you think it's nice that you're gloating you're not wearing a mask in front of them? So people did speak for us, so we could remain professional. And we have the best customers. We treat them like family, and they treat us, and our regulars treat us the same.
That's good to know. You reciprocate the respect. How did that situation come to conclusion? Did they just eventually? They shopped and they left. Yeah.
Legally, they do not have to extend why they do not wear a mask.
Right.
So legally, we can't do anything. We do offer the option of curbside delivery. We extend online delivery, and we've offered personal shopping as well.
So it was announced that we're in a fourth wave. What advice might you have for people as shopping resumes? Beyond this wave or in this wave, and we're on the heels of possibly reopening further, which will change the amount of people and the behavior inside of our businesses in Ontario. What advice might you have for those people that are going to be coming into that environment?
I think, just as a blanket statement, be kind. And if you can't be kind, maybe be quiet.
But that should be like, both of those things I think are pandemic or not.
Right? You asked me the question, Guido, and I'm trying to be as kind as I can be.
Right. Is there any other advice you'd want to leave with us today? As we kind of close things off a bit, or?
I just think, first of all, thank you so much for inviting me onto the podcast so that I can have a voice. I appreciate that, and I do feel like I can speak for many, like, secondary tiered essential workers.
Right.
That we are all of the human race. We all are going through this pandemic in this time of uncertainty, and infected. All of us. We've all been affected in different ways that intersect and that are parallel. And again, it does come down to, let's just be kind, because you don't know. Maybe somebody, and it has happened, team members not only working through pandemic, they suffered loss. You don't know what someone is going through that is serving you.
Right.
So maybe think about that. And if you're really that passionate about your view regarding this topic, maybe not have yourself involved in such agitating environments. Maybe do online then. If it really bothers you to wear a mask, then maybe perhaps look, there's many out-of-the-box solutions now for that. And just honestly, we're going through all this, and every day there's going to be changes, and together it's stronger than us all being segregated and separate. And I just think let's just try and be kind. Because we're all going through it in different ways.
There you go. First, you're serving us at the grocery stores, and now you're serving us some alternatives. So it just the giving never ends, Kimberly.
Thank you.
I appreciate that you did this because we often talked about the frontline workers, and for me, there was this large group out there providing us these retail and food services to keep us going. And I wanted to make sure that we captured that and talked about it and just gave people some insights on, it wasn't an easy or isn't an easy journey for you either. And you've certainly been able to share that experience with us today.
Again, thank you so much for the opportunity for my voice to be heard. I truly appreciate that, Guido.
There you have it, folks. Kimberly sharing with us her frontline service experience. And we certainly appreciate that and wish you the best. Take care, Kimberly.
You as well. Thank you so much.
Go on with Guido podcast listeners. Welcome back to the 4 Fans Talk Sports, where everyone here is expressing their opinions as fans, just like you, as usual. There are no network obligations, no sponsor pressures, no product placement, just pure fandom mania. I welcome back to the panel Brian from Barrie, Roland from Windsor, Clark from the Greater Detroit, Michigan, USA, myself from the GTA. Welcome back, everybody. It's good to see and hear everybody again.
Good to be here.
Good to be here.
Right on. Hey, before we get going, Brian, I think I have to offer you some family condolences. Charlie Watts passed away, drummer from the Rolling Stone, part of the Watts family.
Yep, part of the Watts family, a legendary drummer.
Yeah.
I'm working on my chops, seeing if I can take over, but I think the odds of that are slim and remote. So,
he was
it was sad news.
I know we don't usually talk music, but he was an awesome generational drummer, right?
I got to see him, if you can believe it. 2019, the Rolling Stones played in at Burroughs Creek, which is about 10 minutes north of Barrie, where I live. So we got up close and personal and watched the Stones from about 20 yards away. And they, for the age of the guys, they put on an amazing show. And there was Charlie right in the thick of it, just banging away on the drums. So a lot of people sad today to hear of his passing. So
you've seen them a few times, Roll, the Stones?
Yeah, so a couple times. First time at the Pontiac Silverdome, way back in the late 70s, early 80s. I forget what the tour was called. There was like 80,000 people there. It was, and I was up in the nosebleed sections.
Clark,
it was a great time.
Clark, are you a Stones fan at all or a Charlie fan?
A little bit. I like some classic rock, but not, I'm not a huge fan.
So the closest I got to the Rolling Stones, I might be dating myself if I say 20 years ago. 20 years ago, I lived in central Toronto, Davisville Avenue, and the Stones were practicing at a school a block away from me. So I'd walk down the block, and it was all barricaded out, and there were all these security guards all around the school, and we could hear Rolling Stones songs, and we could hear Mick, and we'd say to the security guard, "When are the Stones going to come out?" And he'd say, "I don't know what you're talking about." I'm like, "The Rolling Stones are playing in the building. Right? Can you tell us when they're going to come out?" Yeah, I don't know anything about the Rolling Stones, right? We did, one time we stuck around and we saw the other guy, Keith, the other guy, older guy there, Keith Richards. We saw him sort of escape into a car and stuff, and that was the closest I've ever gotten to the Stones and hearing Charlie and the drum beats and all that stuff. So it was sad for that to have happened. And then I just made the connection to the Watts family tree there. So
there you go. Thanks, Craig.
Yeah, no problem. So guys,
the other big one was the big SARS one in 2003. They headlined that concert.
Oh, right.
A lot of people got to see the Stones there. That was a massive crowd.
Wasn't that at Downsview? Was that Downsview?
Yeah, somebody was showing the pictures of that crowd just during the COVID thing, just to show the way it was, right? It was just massive, the crowd that came out to see them for the SARS concert.
Big celebration to end that, right?
Yep, absolutely.
So we got a lot of sports stuff to talk about. So let's get that rolling. The Olympics are over. A lot happened in the Olympics. It was so much fun to watch. We chatted a bit about it last month. I just thought we'd say, now that it's over, but the Paralympics started. So I'm hoping that there's support for that. I know I posted on my site the schedule for the Paralympics. So if you're interested in that. But I'm just curious what everybody's favorite Olympic moment might have been. You want to kick it off, Brian?
Sure. I'll kick it off. I didn't go for the obvious. Mine was Damian Warner, the decathlon winner, gold medal decathlon for Canada. Considered by many to be the best athlete in the Olympics. If you think of the decathlon with 10 different events, to win that, although a lot of people will say the 100-meter dash is the sort of the shining moment of the Olympics. So I thought Damian Warner, setting a new Olympic record, not over 9,000 points. He won the long jump and the hurdles. Just looks like a nice guy. Like, just to watch the joy in the guy's face as he was competing, and seemed to be really represent Canada well. And when he pulled off fifth in the 1,500 meters and exceeded the 9,000 points and set the Olympic record, that was the highlight for me, amongst many highlights that I'm sure will be discussed. But I thought that was a great one for Canada.
For me, it's like a guy like that. It's inspirational. I want to be able to do it. I don't think I can. But I think, if I could just do a quarter of one of those events, then
exactly,
I'm doing all right.
Unbelievable.
Unbelievable. How about you, Clark, from the other side of the river? What do you think?
I didn't pay a whole lot of attention to the Olympics, but the thing that really jumped out, and no pun intended, was the tie for the gold medal in the high jump. You've got two guys that basically just say, you know what? No, we don't need to worry about a tiebreaker. We both win. That is just ridiculously cool to me.
Yeah. So you know what? That's mine. That was my moment too, and that's what I picked. It was Mutaz Essa Barshim of Qatar and Gianmarco Tamberi of Italy. They shared the gold medal for the men's high jump. They both cleared 2.37 meters. They both tried for 2.39, and I think they both missed twice. And then they kind of said, "Can we both win?" And I just thought, isn't that the Olympics? Like, isn't that what, like the sportsmanship and what we're supposed to be?
Exactly.
And if these guys can say that in a world where we're competing all the time and trying to be better than somebody or faster, these guys just kind of said, "Hey, we tied. Like, can we both do it?" And yeah, go for it. So same thing. I'm with you, Clark. That was the pick that I went with. How about you, Ro?
It's going to be a 2-2 tie here, because I have what Brian had, Damian Warner. I saw him as a true Olympian, just everything that they did. And I'm just going to go over this quickly. Day one, it was a 100-meter long jump, shot put, high jump, and the 400-meter race. Day two, 110 hurdles, discus, pole vault, javelin, and the 1,500-meter race. That's incredible. And all of those athletes, all of the decathletes, they were good at all of those events. And Damien just outshone everybody there. And watching that was like, wow, I can't believe, he did that. And again, he broke that record, over 9,000 points, 9,018 points.
Endurance and resiliency.
I think it was in the long jump that if he'd been competing in the regular, like his length, I think if he'd been competing in the regular, just straight long jump, he would have medaled in that as well.
He would have medaled. Wow. Yeah.
There was one, I think it was that one. There was one where he would have medaled if he'd been in the regular.
And like 5 events each day. That's incredible. Yeah, that's incredible.
I was thinking about this, if I can, Guido. There was something because we always talk about the greatest athletes and that, and the one that for me it wasn't a great moment, but it's one that kind of sticks out for me is the swimming. The swimmers are always considered the greatest athletes, but I don't think so, and I'll tell you why. Because they got so many opportunities to win medals. They have the 100 meters. The 200 meter, the 400 meter, the 100 meter individual relay, the team relay, like they do so many different events of it that it stands to reason that a good swimmer is going to win 3, 4, or 5 medals. Whereas a guy like a Damian Warner, who has only a chance to win one, but as Roland said, 5 different events in one day. So when they talk about great Olympians, I look at that as a greater Olympian than someone that may have won 2 or 3 medals where they've got the chance to do it in so many variations of the same event.
Is there a different value to a gold medal as well? When you see somebody do that, like Damien, and then you have, I don't know, some event they just added to the Olympics where you go, they're handing out a gold medal for that? Really? But, I don't know. I look at that too and I go, no. They seem to be a bit off. The whole thing seems to be a bit off.
I mean, the Olympics have arced, right? They've gone through a bit of a transition. They've, if you will, modernized. Like we saw skateboarding and a bunch of other things in there that, kids are doing these days. But I'm saying kids, and we haven't touched. I think one of the listeners reached out to me and said, hey, one of the things, if you guys want to talk about it, can you guys talk about the age of the Olympians? Like, you've got 12-year-old kids. And I thought, you know what, that's a good, I mean, it's a good topic, right? Like, how young is too young? And, you know, are they competing in the right areas and in the right sports? Is it right for them to be there at such a young age? I was blown away by some of the 12-year-old, like the 12-year-old divers, the skateboarders. I was like, oh, I couldn't believe it, right? But I don't know when, and I don't know what the answer is, if there was ever a restriction on age or not. But that was phenomenal.
I don't think so.
No, eh?
Yeah, I don't think so. Even the gymnastics, too, those young girls, like 13, 14 years old. Yeah, I don't think there is.
You know,
I think it depends on each Olympic, on each country, on who they want to send, but I could be wrong.
We're gonna one of our topics today is mental health in sports, and I just wonder, them being so young, you know, if that at some point plays into that. But I'll park that for a bit, and we'll get to it. One of the other things we wanted to talk about today was Tony Esposito passing away. Great goaltender for the Chicago Blackhawks. Brian, you want to kick the Tony Espo stuff?
Sure. I'll talk about Tony O, because I used to pretend I was Tony O when I was putting on the old street hockey pads back on Spruce Avenue in Richmond Hill, and everyone else was Phil trying to put that orange ball behind me. So, yeah, Tony O, one of the absolute classic goalies in the NHL. Born in Sault Ste. Marie in your hometown, number 35, played 16 seasons in the NHL, 15 with Chicago. Don't know if you know, but his first season was with was with the Habs. He's actually got his name on the cup with the Habs because he didn't play in the finals, but he was with the team. Patented the butterfly move, the butterfly stance. I still envision him in those old leather pads, those old beige leather pads that the goalies used to wear. What a guy! First NHL game he actually played against his brother Phil. Phil scored 2 goals on him, but they ended up in a 2-2 tie. That's back in the days when they were allowed to tie games, and they kept it a tie. Won the Vezina 3 times. Rookie of the Year, the Calder winner in 69-70. Still, I believe, holds the record for most shutouts in one season with 15. He was the goalie. He started the first game in the Russia Summit Series. The guy's resume and hockey resume just is unbelievable. He's ranked number 79 out of the top 100 players of all time. He was elected into the Hall of Fame in Sault Ste. Marie in 2007, elected into the NHL Hall of Fame in 88. Chicago retired his number in 1988. Just a classic guy. And my biggest memory of Tony Esposito was playing the old Phil and Tony Esposito action hockey game. I think it was made by Parker Brothers or Mattel. And it was the only one that had the magnets underneath where you could move the puck. You had your hands underneath the rod one. And I used to have it, and Guido, you and I were talking. I lamented. I'm sure my mom tossed it out, and those things are up around $200-300 on eBay now. So, wow. Anyway, real loss to the hockey world to lose one of the real pioneers of goaltending. He was a right-handed goalie. I mean, he caught with his right hand and used his. Means he was a left-handed person. He used his left hand to hold the stick and the blocker. So, just a classic guy, and he'll be missed for sure. One of the legends of the game.
Yeah, you mentioned a whole bunch of really cool stats there. He did debut with Montreal in 1968-69. He played 13 games. He was left unprotected because of Canadians. There's some other great goalies that they had too.
They had Gump Worsley and Rogie Vachon.
But he was taken by the Blackhawks in an interleague draft for $25,000.
Yeah.
Like you put that into perspective of the today's monies. Now, Roel, we lived across the street from the Esposito. So you have any Esposito memories?
No, not particularly of them. They were much older than us. I think the parents were still living on the street. They had moved away when we were there. But and I didn't even know Tony had been drafted by the Habs, to be honest with you, right? Because when I was watching him, Gump Worsley was there and Rogie Vachon was there. And then later on, they had another young kid in the pipeline around the same age as Espo, Ken Dryden. So that's probably why they left Tony unprotected. But the memory that I have of him is that, Dad loved the Esposito brothers, right? Whenever I used to ask Dad what teams he cheered for, it was them. It's like, well, where's Phil? Because Phil started off in Chicago, I believe, right? So Phil was with Chicago, went to Boston. All of a sudden, Boston is his team, and he always liked the Hawks too because Tony was there. And I absolutely adored Tony Esposito. Right? He's the only player I ever sent fan mail to. Right? So I sent him a letter.
Did he answer you?
Yeah, he did. He answered me. He sent, and I must have it at home. He sent me this postcard with him on the postcard in playing goal for the Blackhawks, and I wanted to be a goalie as well. But Mom and Dad, they wouldn't even enroll us in hockey. It was too expensive, so we didn't get to do that. But I played in grade school, whatever, right? So I said to him, "What does it take to be a good goalie? What does it take to be a good goalie?" And I still remember what he said to me. He said, "Hard work. You need to practice. You need good equipment," and he said to have fun. And that's what he wrote on the back of the postcard.
In that order? Was it in that order?
Yeah, I think it was in that order. And the other part with the Esposito brothers was that back then in hockey, when the season was over, they came back home and they had real jobs. They worked in the steel mill with Dad and Uncle and Grandpa, right? It's like they would come back and they would be doing like you did, in the summers before, going to school. They worked in the steel mill. They didn't make that much money in hockey at that time, so they had to come back and have real jobs.
That's interesting memories, right? That's cool. I didn't know you got fan mail from Tony. But I like that. I like the list of the things that he said, because the first thing he said is work hard. Right. Yeah. And nowadays, I don't know if anybody says work hard is the first thing anymore. It's have fun. I think have fun is what most people say. Yeah. Right. But
work hard and practice.
I know, and
good equipment, right? You need good equipment. Yeah.
Clark, anything for you on Tony? I'm at the mercy of the older guys here today. So.
Well, I think, the thing that really strikes me is that, hockey is so steeped in tradition, the whole old-time hockey thing, that even for me, someone who can't stand the Blackhawks, can't help but mourn what the sport has lost.
Yeah. And I think, I think that's the difference between the types of players, right? Brian and I have talked about this, every once in a while we kick the dust on this one, because we always say, there's players who are players on the ice, and then there's players who are players on the ice, but there's something special off the ice too, right? And I think that family probably fits into that category. They carried themselves, appropriately off the ice as well. So
we lost another one this week as well, Rod Gilbert, and he played with the Rangers. Another fantastic player. I mean, I enjoyed watching him, on the ice. Just his shot. I remember his slap shot. He'd come over that blue line and just fire that puck. Another great player. I believe he played for Team Canada as well, or that 72 series. He was part of that team as well.
I wonder, do we look at some of these guys that went through at that different era? Do we look at them differently than we look at some of the players we look at today?
Absolutely.
I'll tell you something that's interesting, Reed, is it relates back to hockey cards. And when I was at that era, when he was in 72, I was 10 years old. And the Tony S, we used to flip cards and flip them against the wall, and you do, closies and topsies and all that, right? But there were certain cards that you just took out of your pack.
Yeah.
And the Espositos were those cards. I still got a bunch of Tony Esposito cards and Phil Esposito and a bunch of other stars, and none of those have any of the corners dented. Why? Because they never made it into the game. Those were your ones that those guys were revered back then. They were just class acts. Yeah. The other thing I wanted to mention, he was also the GM of Pittsburgh, for a while, and he was responsible for Pittsburgh getting Tom Barrasso.
Oh, nice.
And then later, when Phil took over Tampa Bay, Tony went and worked with Phil as as their chief scout for a while. So, you know, just a true hockey guy. These are the guys that they're probably born into hockey and stayed in the game until they departed the world, right? So
deep roots, and we all agree. Great hockey player, great human being with deep roots. Now, you know, on another thing that we talk about, great human beings. You know, we give athletes a lot of credit, and we hold them in high esteem. And I guess we have certain expectations from our athletes. And we started talking about it earlier when we were chatting tonight about mental health and the impact of perhaps age on Olympians and how that might play out for them. And Clark, you brought it up actually last episode when we were talking, and you said, you know, we kind of touch on this thing every time. It has some element to some of our conversation, but mental health and sports. And during the last few months, and even going back to the NHL playoffs, so we saw some stuff from Robin Lehner online, goalie for the Vegas Knights there, and you know, being forthright and about it and having the conversation, and some of the flack that he was taking from fans online over that. And then it kind of really, we got some more highlights of it. Naomi Osaka, tennis star. She kind of pulled out of some events and in terms of media, not wanting to talk to the media. And we eventually learned that, look, it's a mental health issue. And there was a whole bunch of flack on Naomi for that. And then we really saw it on the international stage with Simone Biles, U.S. Olympic champ, who withdrew from some competitions, basically going, I can't do it. I can't land it. Not going to land it. And I can't bring myself to do it. What's striking to me about it all is that I go on Twitter or social media, and the volume of people who are, like, they're just after these athletes, like, they're just relentless on them, right? And I'm thinking to myself, separate the game from the person just for a minute here, right? We're at a place, I think, now in our society where these folks are able to actually come and say, I can't do this. We've seen in the past where athletes can't do it and they turn to other things like substance abuse, right? Like, I don't want to get too deep into it because I don't know enough about it, but, you know, one of the things that comes to mind, Bob Probert was that one of the guys, right? Wade Belak, was he one of the guys? And I'm just pulling names, like, as I'm thinking off the top of my head, going back to these guys, right? I don't know, were you guys on the same page? Like, you were watching these guys and these events happen, and a little bit disgusted with people and some of the reactions, but respecting some of the athletes for taking off their cape just for a moment and showing us who they might be, like, as human beings.
I think, and you touched on this quite a bit, the reaction to Robin Lehner and Osaka and Biles, it shows how far we have to go with acceptance of mental health as far as putting it on the same level as physical health, that we kind of have this implied that mental health problems with mental health imply weakness, or that there's distrust when it comes to somebody saying, hey, I need time for my mental health, that we expect athletes to know their bodies better than anyone else, but it's somehow a stretch for them to know what's going on in their own heads better than anyone else. And I don't have a solution for that. I hate that I don't have a solution for that. It really bothers me. I wish there was an easy way to say, hey, people, listen, this is how it is, but it's never going to be that way. Robin Lehner actually said the summer that he was a free agent leaving Buffalo, and when he ended up with the New York Islanders, that he went into an interview with a team that seemed like they were really interested in him, and the team just absolutely berated him the whole time about what kind of bad teammate he must have been, and things like that. And it just blows my mind And I have a conspiracy theory guess on which team that is, and I'm not going to say it out loud, but I have before. We are just so far from accepting that. And I'm not saying that I'm not saying that we should treat, like, if somebody says, oh, mental health, it can't be used as an excuse. It should, there are times when you need to take time for your mental health. And there are times when there are certainly people that use that as an excuse. And the more that we let that be used as an excuse, the more it devalues when it's actually necessary. So I'm not trying to say we should blanket excuse everything as a mental health issue, but we've got to have a way to be better about it.
Clark, if I can, you touched on something, and that was around like dealing with it and taking the time for it. Like, it's known on physical injuries, you need the time to heal. You know, if you break a bone, you have a bruise, you have a strain, you need to take the time. And when I look at some of these players and some of these elite athletes and the pressure to perform, the fear of failure, the high standards that are set for them, the high standards they probably set for themselves, the spotlight they're constantly under, the media, the regular media, and then put on top of that all the trolls and everybody on the social media that just, you know, easy to be a critic behind a fake name or whatever, right? Every move's watched, and so that's gotta get to people at some point, and especially if you're struggling or if your game's off a bit or whatever, and then everybody starts hammering on you. And I agree, like, just like a physical injury, if your mind is not in the right place, a few days off to get it into the right place. You know, mental health is this huge thing. It's huge. It covers so many different things. And I think one of the things is people have a narrow view of what mental health is, because it covers so many different areas. I would dare to say that probably everybody at some point struggles with some mental health things at some point in their life for sometimes a short period of time, sometimes a long period of time, sometimes it's there, you know, intermittently. But I think kudos to these people to Simone, to Naomi, to Robin Leonard, to speak out and say, you know what, I'm more important. I don't care what you say. I don't care what the media says. I don't care what the fans say, the trolls say. I'm more important. Good on them, because they made the absolute right call.
I think all three of you guys nailed that. Like, you guys all nailed it. The pressure on these athletes is unbelievable. I'm going to revert a little bit to hockey, where, you know, the Habs, they lost Jonathan Drouin mid-season all of a sudden, and they didn't say too much about it, and they still haven't come out and said much about it. You know, he's done for the year. He can't play. We want this. It's a private issue. We're going to keep it private. I'm sure that's what it was all about, because he was being hammered in the media constantly. I can't imagine, you know, the pressure playing in Montreal and then expecting him to be some kind of savior there, and you know, being their top athlete. I think that really bothered him, and they lost him for half the year. Now they say he's coming back. How's he going to come back? How's the media going to treat him when he comes back? It's you know, and that's going to start in another 6-7 weeks. So we're going to see how that's going to work out. But yeah, the way you guys, all three of you explained it, you guys nailed it.
We don't know with Drew, and we don't know. We think that's. We think that's what it is. I think when it comes to the mental health thing, though, and the physical health, and Clark, you started to touch on it, was, hey, if I'm a hockey player and I break my wrist, you might see me in a cast. If I get poked in the eye, you might see me with an eye patch. But if I say there's something, isn't working, isn't connecting for me inside my head, you don't know. We're not educated enough. We're not doctors enough. We're not experienced enough. None of us have been trained enough in it. and we all have that opinion, right? And we just look at it and go, oh yeah, we haven't overcome that opinion yet. And you're right. I think, there's folks, like Bryce said, it's such a big spectrum, mental health. It's a big spectrum. And there's some fans out there that might look at it from a very narrow view of what they believe mental health is. So hats off. You're right. Hats off. We're all in agreement on that one. And I think that we use some of those folks as examples to help move that forward. Talking about moving forward, this next topic is a back and forth one for a number of years. The Phoenix Coyotes, they're Phoenix now, right? They're not Arizona. They're Phoenix. Are they Phoenix or Arizona?
Arizona.
Oh, see, Arizona.
Arizona, yeah.
Whatever. The last copy of the EA Sports game I have is Phoenix. Anyways, we'll get to EA Sports in a bit and their NHL game. So the Arizona Coyotes, their lease is winding down. The city of Glendale, Arizona informed the Coyotes that it's terminating its lease. And this is the last year that they'll play at I think it's Gila River Arena. So for you guys, I was like, hey, if the Coyotes go somewhere, where do you want to see them go? And are they really going to go this time? Or is it going to be is Gary Bettman going to swoop in and save the day in Arizona again? I think he's running the team anyways, but Clark, let's start with you because you're on that side of the border. What do you think? Arizona.
So this not being a Coyotes fan, this is really interesting to me. I'm sure if I was a Coyotes fan, I would hate all of this, but I get to view it like from a distance. So like I do feel bad for Coyotes fans to a certain extent. They've gone through a lot. Some of the stuff that I hear from them, I question a little bit. I get a lot of, oh, well, nobody wants to go out to Glendale because it's on the wrong side of Phoenix and you have to drive so far. And it's like, I've never lived closer than 45 minutes from my team's arena. I don't really have a whole lot of compassion for, oh, it's on the wrong side of town. I have to drive an hour. But nonetheless, the thing that's really interesting to me here is Glendale's play, because they've been working with the Coyotes on a year-to-year deal for many years now. And the Coyotes have not been quiet about wanting a new arena. They want their new arena in Tempe, closer to where their fans supposedly are. And Gary Bettman, you mentioned, I don't like using him as a boogeyman, but he has stated staying in Glendale isn't going to work long-term for the Coyotes. So I look at this and I say, Glendale's going to lose this team anyway. And if they wait long enough for the Coyotes to get their act together and build this new arena in Tempe, not only are they losing their team, but there's another new arena in the Phoenix area being built to compete with them. So if I'm Glendale, this absolutely makes sense to me to say, no more one-year deals until you get your new arena. We're kicking you out now because we're going to lose you anyway. And good luck finding a way to get your new arena built in 1 year. So they lose the Coyotes anyway. But if the Coyotes relocate, the Tempe arena never happens, which means there's not a competitor for the arena in Glendale. I think that's a brilliant move by Glendale to do that. Unless it's just a negotiating ploy, which it could be. There are a lot of other ways that this happens. There's the Coyotes owner, Alex Murillo, per Elliot Friedman last spring, he's not really interested in owning the team anyway. There's a law on the books in Arizona that says there are two ways to be able to operate a sports book and get all that money in the state of Arizona. One is to be a Native American tribe. The other is to own a pro sports team in Arizona. So he really wants to own this team so that he can get a sports book and rake in all the cash from that. So is it worth it to him to come crawling back to Glendale? Is it worth it to him to crawl to the Phoenix Suns owners and pay a ton of money to play downtown? Is it worth it to him to play at the ancient arena at the Arizona State Fairgrounds? until the new Tempe Arena gets built. There's a lot of money there. That has to be taken into consideration. And that's before we even look at what if all of this falls through and they end up going somewhere else.
So are you saying
I'm not even gonna touch on that one. I'll leave that up to you guys.
Oh, come on.
Because there are so many different there's so many layers to it.
Everything you said is
blows my mind.
You've got so much info there, and thank you. Like the perspective on that. I hadn't thought about the hey, there, this is part of a gameplay on behalf of Glendale, but I could buy into that. I could buy into that thought pattern, right? You could say, hey, I'm going to boot you out. You're not going to build an arena. You're going to have to leave. Or, hey, let's make a long-term deal if you want to stick around, and I'll bite the bullet. But let's just pretend all of that was honky dory. Where would you put the team, Clark?
I think next in line for the NHL is Houston. I think that Tillman Fertitta, owner of the Houston Rockets, has been in regular communication with the NHL about this. It's the biggest market in North America that doesn't have an NHL team. And conveniently, the Coyotes were just relocated into the Central Division that Houston would fit nicely into. So I think there's a lot going there.
I can't wait. If they're going to be like another sports league and get called the Houston Oilers. So we'll have two Oilers teams. Brian, how about you? Where do you sit on
that? Listen, Clark's applying all the logic to it, and I don't disagree with him. So I'm going to go just dare to dream. I'm going to apply zero logic to this and just dare to dream. And for me, it would be the Nordiques to Quebec, to bring back another team to Quebec and have that restore that old rivalry between the Habs and the Nordiques would be phenomenal. And I'm sure there's a whole bunch of Statsny grandkids just waiting to be drafted by the Nordiques so that we can have the old Statsny from Statsny on the score sheet. That for me would be the ultimate.
So you're moving the Coyotes back to Quebec and reviving the Nordiques. How about you, Ro?
Yeah, that would be my dream as well. I lived through that when the Nordiques were around, and the rivalry with Montreal was fantastic. I hated them, by the way. Even Dale Hunter was on that team. I couldn't stand them. Yeah. And the games, like they were playoff games during the year. At that time, I would love to see them back in Quebec. I don't know, but I think I'm with Clark here. They'll probably be heading to Houston. That's the talk that's been going around. Or maybe even Southern Ontario there, right? Wouldn't it be great to have another team in Southern Ontario to go up against the Leafs? What do you think that rivalry would be like? That would be pretty cool to see too. Maybe in your own neighborhood there in Barrie or something, right? Put a new NHL team and then see how it goes. I mean, the population is there for it as well. So
Toronto,
I don't know.
No, MLS Sports Entertainment would never let that happen.
I wonder how that works too. Like Montreal lets them into their territory, and it's not a problem, right? But Toronto has always stymied any other team coming in the GTA area.
It's the same way Austin Matthew makes it under the cover of EA Sports NHL 22 twice. So it's the exact same way. But I'm with you. Clark. I think what you're seeing here is in the Canadian sort of contingency is hope. We're dreamers, and we have hope that we're going to get another Canadian team because we think it's our game, right? I'm with Brian and Roland and saying, man, I'd love to see it back in Quebec. I want to see the Quebec Nordiques. I'm hoping it doesn't affect my fantasy hockey league team in the DFHL, but I would like to see that. They have an arena. It suits 18,000 fans. I think it was built in 2015. Now, that's 6 years already. And I know, when you said, hey, they've talked to the owner of Houston and they've got the Quebec put in a bid and filled out the application back in 2015. they all thought it was going to happen. They were in competition with Seattle, and then the Nordiques became the Kraken. So that it didn't happen. Now, Hamilton, we remember, the Blackberry, was it Basile, Jim Basile there for a while, almost made it 7 or something. So that they were, but I can't see that ever happening with the Toronto Maple Leafs. I know Saskatoon was in the mix for a bit, but I can't see that happening. My hope is Quebec. I think it'll be some city in the United States, though. Again, probably Houston, maybe something else. Brian.
Hey, Gleed, I got to share with you, just because we're talking about the Nordiques, and this goes back to the 80s. My first couple of years when I worked with M&R, I was in a hockey pool, and everybody was loading up on halves, and I picked. It was one of those reverse drafts. We just went round and around, and you could pick different players. Somehow I ended up with Marion Stastny, Anton Stastny, Peter Stastny, and Michel Goulet. And the Nordiques won that year. They didn't win the cup, but they went like 2 rounds. I was 45 points ahead of everybody by the end of the first round of the playoffs, because the score sheet, they were like winning games 7-2, and it was Stastny from Stastny and Stastny, Goulet from Stastny and Stastny. 30 points in one game. It was ridiculous.
You know what? How come?
So yeah, I'd love to see him come back.
How come Wilf Piemont isn't getting any love here? How about Wilf?
He ended up with the Leafs, didn't he?
Yeah, he's a good player.
That explains it all.
But he never got a cover of EA.
He didn't. They didn't have EA back then, but I'm sure. I'm sure back then Alan Bester would have made the cover of EA Sports just because he played for Toronto. I know I'm going to get Toronto hate mail after if GTA folks are listening to this, but that's okay. All right, so good luck to the Arizona Coyotes wherever they may find their Roadrunners. Sticking with the franchises.
Start learning French.
Exactly. Well, can you imagine the first question if they go to Quebec? Are you all taking French classes or not? No, who knows?
That is the first.
It is the first question, but it would be nice for them. All right, staying with sports and franchises, renaming of sports franchises. So we have the Cleveland Indians who've become the Cleveland Guardians. I have no idea what the Cleveland Guardians are supposed to represent. That's what they are, but they're already in a legal battle because allegedly, I read somewhere they took the name from some other sports team, and now they're in battle whether they can be called the Cleveland Guardians or not. So I don't know if that was a rush to merchandise or what it was. The Edmonton Eskimos have become the Edmonton Elks. And in that one, we know that the Edmonton sports franchise worked with Indigenous leaders who say that the new name is a step forward. So there's some substance to their naming there. We have the Washington football team in the NFL, formerly the Redskins, who are wandering around namelessly, but they do have a long list of potential names they're looking to get. And then we have a bunch of teams that are not changing their names. We have the Kansas City Chiefs, who are going to stay the Chiefs. We have the Chicago Blackhawks, who are staying who have some ties to an actual. It honors the actual life of a Native American, and the Atlanta Braves, who have banned the tomahawk chop, but have no intentions of changing their name. Where are we with all this stuff? What do you guys think in terms of the whole franchise and naming and what we think? Clark?
So it's all. Actually, I'm going to lead with saying that I'm the last person who gets to tell someone what they should or shouldn't be offended by. That's my take on a lot of this. That if I hear that a name is offensive to insert group here, I'm going to take that and take them at their word there and say, hey, okay, then I'm with you. I mean, what needs to change? I say that knowing that you can't break out a name that is going to offend me. that there isn't the there aren't the systemic issues behind some of these names that would ever be with a name that could be applied to me. It's just I'm never going to understand it on a personal level.
Right.
So I'm gonna believe when people say it's offensive. You can always trot out somebody who says it's not offensive, and I'm gonna side with the people who say that it is.
So you're changing the.
I'm not saying that there has to be consensus there. Just I'm willing to side with the people who say that they are hurt by that name.
Brian.
Yeah, and I think if we look at the names, it relates to a race of people. It relates in a lot of cases to the Indigenous community, right? And if I look at most of the other names of teams, they're novelty names. There are a lot of animals, birds, things like. So now you're lumping in a race of people in with a novelty name. Like, what does the Edmonton football team have to do with Eskimos? What does the Chicago Blackhawks even have to do? They're saying they're honoring a Native American. Was he a pioneer of hockey or something like that? It doesn't make any sense. And if there are people that are offended by it, I think we, as Clark said, we got to take them by their word. And that's where I relate with the Indigenous people here, saying that they're racist in some sense, being trivialized by being lumped in with the names that are, Bears and Cubs and Cavaliers and Maple Leafs and Canadians, what have you, right? Kudos to Edmonton for changing. Kudos to Washington for doing the right thing even before they came up with a replacement. I'm a little disappointed in Kansas, Chicago, and Atlanta for not following suit.
Yeah, I agree with you guys as well. The term that I wrote down on that section was it's offensive. And if it's offensive, it should be changed. I don't know. Yeah, the other teams that refuse to change it. I don't know the story behind the Blackhawks. I don't know if that referred to, was that a flying unit in World War II?
It was
Chicago?
So it was John McLaughlin, the original owner of the Chicago team, was in the Black Hawk Battalion or something like that.
86.
In World War One, which was named after Chief Black Hawk.
Two. Well, it was, you're right, it was the Frederick McLaughlin, World War II in the 86th Infantry Division. It was nicknamed the Black Hawk Division after Chief Black Hawk. That's what's on the Chicago Blackhawks team site. So, look,
I'm curious about that because they were named in 1926, which was before World War II. Right. So there's something wrong there.
Interesting, right? So there's some pieces there. They're the one team that at least offers some sort of something, and hockey has always seemed to have been tied to wars and battles and things like that. So is there credibility to that one? Maybe a lot more credibility than the Atlanta Braves or the Washington Redskins. I don't know. It just Brian, I'm with you in terms of, you're acknowledging the Indigenous community there, and you're kind of going, look, if you look at all of these things that I've said here, the Cleveland Indians, the Edmonton Eskimos, the Washington Redskins, what's the common theme? The Atlanta Braves, the Kansas City, it's all to do with Indigenous, right? You compare those names to all the other franchises we have, right? The Maple Leafs, it's a tree.
Yeah, I tried to think of another team. I tried to think of another team that dealt with a race of people, and the only thing I could and there's probably more, but the only one that I could come up with was the Fighting Irish of Notre Dame.
It's almost always that one or the Boston Celtics that get brought up.
Yeah, but there's not, I can't really think of anything else. Even with the story with the Blackhawks, with the battalion, look what their logo is.
Right.
They got an Indian, and I was at a hockey tournament where Dennis Hall made a very offensive joke about the Indigenous people that were there participating in the hockey tournament, looking like what was on the front of their sweaters. I couldn't believe it.
Wow.
So
I think we reached a point. I think when these things were named, the understanding wasn't there at the time. I think we've reached a point where I want to believe that as a society we're progressing in our understanding, and it's okay. I just think it's okay to change it for the right reasons.
I agree. It was probably a different era when the names were put in. A different way of thinking. We didn't have all of the social understanding that we do now, but now that we do, that's why I said again, kudos to the teams that made the move, and a little bit of shame on the ones that are resisting. They don't get it.
I'm gonna leave it on that note, because I think we're all in agreement. We're agreeing a lot today. Is this normal? I don't know. So guys, not 18 million over the cap, Brian. NFL season starts on Thursday, September 9th. I'm just anxious to see how many people are going to pack in the stadium, given that we're in the fourth wave of COVID-19. And I think the United States may have hit their highest numbers in ICU ever during this pandemic for COVID-19. So again, I don't want to belabor COVID-19. I'm just in awe every time I see that. And I don't want to say the wrong thing, but I think I read somewhere on Twitter today that in Ontario or Canada, they're looking at upping the numbers that they're going to allow for indoor events as well. Again, with the wave that's happening, I am at a loss for understanding and words for that. But all that being said, who's your early Super Bowl pick with the season starting? Rolly, for as long as I've known you in football, I've never known anybody to have so many stats on football. you run the family pool where the greatest prize is a hat. It's a hat, right? That we all fight for that and honor in the family football pool. But you've been keeping football stats for as long as I can remember. So who do you pick to win the Super Bowl?
Well, there's two teams right off the top, Tampa Bay and Kansas City. I also like Baltimore, Tennessee as well. I don't know why.
When you say Tampa Bay, you just really mean Brady.
Well, no, it's more than just Brady there.
But that's right? What you mean. Like whenever somebody says Tampa, if you take Brady, are you still picking Tampa Bay if he's out of the picture?
Who's their backup? I don't know.
Right, there you go. So you wouldn't. It's the Tampa Bay Brady's. Okay, so you're going with the Tampa Bay Brady's.
You know what? I like KC. They might do it again this year, but I also like Baltimore. They always have a tough team. I'm a Steelers fan, by the way. I've always been a Pittsburgh Steelers fan. So going back to the early 70s with Bradshaw and the Steel Curtain and stuff like that, but I've always been a Pittsburgh Steelers fan. It's those top teams. There's only 4 or 5 that always have that good team structure and good defense, good offense, and special teams. So that would be my pick.
How about you, Brian?
Well, even though they're without their star quarterback Drew Brees, I'm going to go with the New Orleans Saints. Who dat? Wow. I think they're overdue. They got jobbed a few years ago by that referee.
Reference to my always.
Not that I would ever be critical of reffing.
But me neither.
No,
me neither.
I like the Saints, and they're Mary Lou's favorite team. So that's when I get to watch NFL games, when the Saints are playing.
Well, so for Brian, New Orleans is not sinking. They are rising. How about little musical reference there, folks? How about you, Clark?
Well, I'm a Lions fan, which means that I don't know what winning looks like.
It's okay. The Toronto Maple Leafs can say the same thing in hockey. The Toronto Maple Leafs fans. So
I mean, Tampa. I mean, how do you really root against, or how do you bet? I certainly know how to root against Brady, but how do you bet against Brady? I mean, until he's gone, you got to bet on him. So yeah, sure, Tampa.
See, it's the Brady factor. I'm not a big Brady fan. Great quarterback. Great quarterback. Arguably very skilled, sometimes very, very lucky. But as the current family football pool champion from last season, that's me. So I'm gonna go with Mahomes in Kansas. I thought they were so close, and it's almost like because hockey is one of my favorite sports, I always revert back to hockey, and it was almost like that bit of a transition, like when the Islanders and the Oilers kind of thing happened, and I'm just looking at Kansas and I'm thinking, they're a really good team. They're deep. The QB, like he's there. He's got that feeling. I'm gonna go with Kansas, and that's my pick. Although, Clark, every year I really want to cheer for the Lions. Like I don't have a favorite football team. I've always just liked football in general. I always want to cheer for the Lions. I always say, okay, I'm gonna cheer for the Lions, and about.
But you don't hate yourself enough to really go through with it.
Right. Right. And by about the third quarter of the first game, I go, that's why I can't cheer for the Lions. Although because of Rolly, I've always liked the Steelers a bit too. It's just the Steelers for me, it's the colors. Like they're so close to the Bruins, and I just can't. I get sick when I think of that. So, it doesn't work for me. All right, guys. So in terms of our topics, before we get to our 4-on-4 and close out our segment for this session, I wanted to end. Brian, for those listening who can't see, Brian's putting on his Austin Matthews Toronto Maple Leafs jersey, and I have the benefit of seeing Brian on the screen here. We're gonna end this month's topic with a little bit of something fun, which is EA Sports announced that they're gonna put Austin Matthews on their international/global cover of their NHL 22 game. Here's my thing. I'm gonna go first on this, and it's this: how do you not pick somebody like Shea Weber or Carey Price or Cole Caulfield or Andre Vasilevsky or Braden Point or just about anybody else, like other than Austin Matthews, who's been on the cover before, and in all of the seasons since they've done this, Brian's sign, Leafs have no cap, right? They're not 18 million over the cap though. But dating back to, I think it was 91 was the first year that the EA Sports did an NHL game. I could be wrong. I think it was 91. In all that time, I think only 6 Canadian team represented players have been on it. It's not always been like, the greatest goal scorer or anything like that. There's never been a Montreal Canadian on the cover that's distributed internationally. PK Subban made it onto the Quebec version a few years back, I think when he won the Norris. Saku Koivu, I think, made it on the Finland version way back when. Mark Streit made it on the Finland version, I think, way back when. But there's never been that. So you got Austin Matthews. So here's my thing. Austin Matthews is on the cover because I believe fans in the GTA who don't even own a Sony PlayStation or an Xbox are going to buy it because Austin Matthews is on it and they're going to make that money. So it's a money grab where Leaf fans are just pouring money on a team that can't get out of the first round of the playoffs. Go ahead there, Brian, since you're itching with your Austin Matthews. You're doing jumping jacks tonight. With
4 goals in his first game in the NHL. The Rocket Richard Trophy winner. Aside from having a goofy porn mustache, arguably one of the best players in the NHL today. Leafs are winning the Cup in 2022, and I'm not even from Woodbridge. I'm done.
That's it? That's your case for Austin Matthews? Typical GTA. All right.
I'm a first-time caller.
Long-time listener, first-time caller. Brian Watts. Advocating for Austin Matthews and anything Toronto Maple Leaf, apparently. How about, Clark, How about you? Like, listen, you're the closest thing I have to reasonability here because you run your own fantasy league that rivals EA Sports in terms of our simming and our results and all that. So where do you sit with this?
So I am a bad example because I still regularly play NHL 94 on my Super Nintendo. So I really could not care less about the modern version of the game. Austin Matthews is on it, sweet, whatever. I'm still playing something you can't tell what players they are. So.
Just for the record, Clark, the covers on that year had two. Thomas Sandstrom from the Los Angeles Kings and Andy Moog from the Boston Bruins. Andy Moog was on the cover and Shea Weber's not. All right. Sorry. How about you, Roland?
I don't. They must have done some sales study or marketing study on demographics on who would sell the most, right? Yeah. And they picked Austin Matthews. I don't know. I don't have a problem with him being on it. I mean, good for him. Maybe if I was in charge, I may have put somebody else on there. Maybe Connor McDavid. I don't know. Maybe he's from Edmonton. Maybe it won't sell as much. Maybe that's the reasoning they took behind it.
Connor McDavid was on it on NHL 18. Yeah, and
I think he's the best player in the NHL. So you would think you would put the best player on there, or like when Sid was on. I don't know. Was he on? I think Sid was on as well.
Crosby.
Yeah, so.
I'm just looking in my list here. I don't think he was. I don't have.
They didn't have Crosby.
No. We've got Patrick Kane, Jonathan Toews, Stamkos, Claude Giroux. Claude Giroux made the cover, but Shea Weber didn't. Martin Brodeur, Jonathan Toews again, Vladimir Tarasenko, but no Shea Weber.
And no Crosby.
I don't see Crosby on it. Isaka, Keatley, Iginla made it with the Flames. Dion Phaneuf made it, but with the Calgary Flames.
Wow, I'm surprised.
Yeah, interesting.
But I don't play those games, so I mean it doesn't matter to me.
Clark, did you hack the lineups though for '94? Like, did you update them and hack the game or?
Oh no! Part of the fun is playing with the old rosters. I have a longstanding thought that the Red Wings NHL 94 roster is the most tragic roster there is.
You're probably right.
You've got Sean Burr and Bob Probert and Steve Chason, and Brad McCrimmon. And you play that game and you're having fun, and then you make you score a goal with Brad McCrimmon, and what are you doing scoring a goal with Brad McCrimmon? And then you're like, oh, and then you're sad. So it's a roller coaster.
Yeah, don't ever get rid of that copy. Hey, Brian.
Yeah, listen, I think you're onto something about having the best player, and I think. When Roland said about the demographics, that's probably one of the reasons why Matthews is there. Is probably around marketing and sales and the like. But I was surprised. I'm having a bit of fun as far as being a huge advocate for him being on. If I think the best player should be on, then I'm surprised why they didn't pick Kucherov. And then they could have had the first topless cover of EA. Shirtless cover. There you go. Now run with that one, Guid.
There are templates that you can design your own covers and throw him on there. Go for it.
Kucherov should Kucherov. You know what? He should be suspended for 10 games to start the season for his shirtless debauchery and his lack of respect for the game and the fans. That's a whole other we're gonna talk about Kucherov again at some point. Not because but he's just.
But you also do.
Classless. I wouldn't put Kucherov on the inside cover even, let alone the outside cover where he could be seen. Lord help me, Kucherov. Can't believe that. All right, I'm done with the esports. It just deteriorated when you went to Kucherov there. All right, we're gonna round it up. We got our 4-on-4. This is where each of us talks for under 1 minute. under 1 minute, uninterrupted. We'll all do that. And then if anybody wants to comment on one other comment at the end, and then we'll close it off. Brian, you want to kick it off?
Sure. So listen, I'm going to keep with a theme. When we did our first podcast, I said old guys rule, and I was talking about Corey Perry and Jason Spezza. Our last one, I said young gays rule, and I was talking about Luke Prokop coming out as the first openly gay NHL player drafted. And I'm going to go a little different, but somewhat the same, and say that old and young girls rule. And I'm talking about the Canadian women's soccer team. Good on them. Christine Sinclair, the seasoned veteran who's played for years and years and years, finally getting her gold medal. And then seeing the likes of up-and-comers Julia Grosso with the game-winning goal in the extra kicks, Jessie Fleming, who was an outstanding stalwart throughout the Olympics. And what a goalie. Stephanie Levy, what an absolute fantastic goalie. So kudos to the Canadians women's soccer. They were my close second in the Olympic highlights. It was such drama watching them win the gold. And old and young girls rule.
That's a good one, Brian. Thank you. Who wants to go next? Roland, you want to go next?
Sure.
Right,
I'm going to Major League Baseball, and the tip of my hat to Miguel Cabrera for hitting his 500th home run. He did it in Toronto. Talk about pressure. He couldn't do it at home, right? They interviewed him and say, I was having a hard time because, there's a lot of pressure trying to hit it at home. Every time he got up to bat, the whole stadium stood up. The poor guy, he got a couple of hits here and there, some strikeouts, but he had a hard time trying to hit it at home. But he did in Toronto, 28th man to reach that feat. There's been over 20,000 players in Major League Baseball, so look at those numbers. He did it against the Blue Jays. I've enjoyed following his career when he started with the Marlins, and his first at bat was a game-winning home run to win it in the 11th inning. He was like 22 years old or something like that, 22, 23. I've enjoyed watching him when I had the chance to go to Comerica. That's one of the reasons I went. And at the time, Dombrowski stole him from the Marlins. I think the players he gave up, I don't think they even made it to the major leagues. So a tip of the hat to Miggy for doing that.
Good one, Roll. Good one. All right, Clark.
I'm going to go back to the Coyotes and say that, I really think there's too much money for Alex Murillo to lose this team, to move somewhere else. I think he's probably going to find a way to make it work in Arizona because there's too much money for him to lose there. But if they do move, like I said, I think Houston is a ready landing spot there. Like you guys, I would love to see a team back in Quebec. I think the best way to do that is to move the team to Atlanta first, because all of Atlanta's teams end up in Canada somehow. So that's what we should be rooting for. The team to land in Atlanta.
6 degrees of getting to Quebec is through Atlanta. That's awesome, Clark. That's a good one. All right. I'm gonna go. When we started chit chatting today, I referenced the Watts family tree, and I started with Charlie Watts and music. But I'm gonna reference some Shakespeare here, and I think you're related to William Shakespeare. You have some family blood there too, right, Brian?
The family tree,
right.
Absolutely.
So mine's a little bit more abstract. Let me read you what I wrote. I said this, and this has to do with the renaming of sports franchises. William Shakespeare wrote in Romeo and Juliet, "It's only your name that's the enemy. You are what you are, even though you may be a Montague. What's Montague? It isn't hand or foot or arm or face or any other part belonging to a man. Oh, I wish you had a different name. What is so special about a name? A rose, even if it were called something else, would smell just as sweet." There's a difference between renaming and rebranding and doing it for the right reasons in the right way. Some sports franchises are changing their names for different reasons, some of them through public pressure, some of them through self-reflection, some of them as an opportunity to rebrand and sell merchandise. For those that are doing it hand in hand with the community in an inclusive manner, I think you're doing it right. For those who are doing it because someone says you should, but aren't changing the fabric of your team culture, then why do it at all? Those who aren't, but are working with the community in question, your authenticity will be your measuring stick. That's my thoughts on the renaming of the sports franchises. Any closing comments on any of the four, or rebuttals, or controversies in Atlanta?
Just on yours, Guido, I just say well said, and I just say Kansas, Chicago, and Atlanta get on board, step up to the plate.
Right on.
Yeah.
Round table, roll, Clark.
No, yeah, I agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not going to argue.
Oh, Brian is giving me the Kucherov for the folks who are listening. He wants to end it on a Kucherov note. Folks, it's been a fun segment. Everybody, thanks for joining us. That's Brian, that's Clark, that's Roland, that's Guido. 4 fans talking sports on the Going with Guido podcast. See you in the fall. I'd like to welcome to the podcast Laura Cavallo, owner and operator of Living Young Design in Richmond Hill, Ontario, Canada, who is here to talk to us today about interior design, including painting tips and other info. Laura, thanks for joining us and welcome to the podcast. How are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm happy that we're able to finally connect and have this conversation. And I'm excited for the listeners because I've always looked for design confidence, and I think we're going to hit that up today, right?
Of course. Whatever you want to talk about.
So listen, I met you. Your storefront is on Yonge Street in Richmond Hill. And if someone types in Benjamin Moore through an internet search, your web address, www.ly-design.ca, is one of the suggested links in this area. That's how I found you. I typed in Benjamin Moore. And I said to you, are you Benjamin Moore? But anyways, we joked around about that a little bit, right?
Yes.
So you are a Benjamin Moore store. How does that affiliation work? Because I couldn't have been the first person that said to you, hey, are you Benjamin Moore?
Yeah, because it gets a little bit confusing because when you come to my store, you'll see we have the Benjamin Moore sign, of course, outside. And then you'll walk in and you'll see behind my main counter, there's another name, and it's Living Young Design. So people are like, well, I don't understand. So basically how it works is we are a licensed dealer of Benjamin Moore products. So you'll notice if you go into like a Home Depot or a Lowe's, they don't carry Benjamin Moore. Benjamin Moore does not sell to those outlets. What they do is they ask people like me who have their own business. My business is Living Young Design. They ask people like me to basically look for a location, which I did, and that's the location I found. And we go through the whole process of becoming a dealer of Benjamin Moore products. So
right.
We're somewhat exclusive to selling only their products in our store. So if you come into my store, I won't have any other brand of paint besides Benjamin Moore.
Right. So when I'm online and I look up the Benjamin Moore and I find, cotton candy, I can come to you and say, I found this cotton candy, and you'll hook me up with the cotton candy paint from Benjamin Moore. That's Absolutely. How it works. Awesome. Yep. Now, when you and I, and thank you for explaining that, but when you and I chatted for a bit at the store, and because I found you online, I said to you, Laura, I didn't even know you were here. And literally you were, you're 5 minutes away from the neighborhood, from my perspective in terms of driving there. Mm-hmm. And when I chatted to you, you said, you know what, we opened this location just as the pandemic was starting.
Yeah.
What's it like? I mean, what's it like to open a personalized retail opportunity during a time of lockdowns and social distancing? I mean, you must have had to overcome some challenges in that time period.
Of course. So, what's it like? I guess first off, scary, because we had literally just opened up months before. I didn't actually think. I turned to my husband and I'm like, that's it. We're gonna go bankrupt. Like, we're gonna have to shut the doors. How is this gonna work, right? But luckily everybody was at home painting, so it wasn't too bad. But some of the challenges, I mean, we had to follow all the safety protocols and whatever guidelines the government was issuing at that time. The biggest challenge, I think, was trying to have customers pick colors without allowing them into our store.
Right.
So, I'm all about customer service, and for me to have to talk to people like at my door and not let them come in, it was almost like unprofessional to me. Like, I was like, this is awful.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, what could I do? It's for safety, right? For everybody's safety. But that was the difficult thing for us, was because I even had customers that would call and say, well, how am I supposed to pick colors if I can't come into the store?
Right.
But you find ways to adjust. So we did whatever we had to do. And realistically, I don't know anything else besides COVID, if you think about it, because I opened my business brand new, and I've had to deal with COVID the entire time so far. So I don't know how my business will run after COVID.
You're a COVID store, I guess. Now, could you have used like pictures? Like if people send you pictures on their phone or things like that, would that work okay, or are there challenges like that too?
Those, I don't ever like to use phones as a reference. I have a lot of customers that come in and they'll be like, oh, here, look at my kitchen, or look at the walls, what color they are now. What would go with this? So phones don't translate color properly, or it will look different from one phone to another. So I don't usually like to use that as a reference point. It's just, it won't ever work.
I guess that makes sense, right? Because if you take a picture with flash on, or there could be shadows, right, and doing that matchup could be very very difficult, I suppose. You mentioned customer service, and that's sort of in you. When I came to your store, one of the observations that I made was that it felt so welcoming. It felt personal. You said, and I asked you about it, and I kind of said, hey, Laura, this is what, you're making me feel this way in our conversation, and you said there's some intent to that, and you said that something along the lines of, in terms of helping beginner do-it-yourselfers, or something along those lines.
Yeah, I mean, I always knew I wanted the atmosphere of my store to be almost like family-like, where people would come in and we know them by name, and they'd feel very comfortable being there, and they would just have a good vibe. And that's always, I always want my customers to walk away and say, you know what, I had a really good experience in that store. They were great. Because that's what people remember, and that's what my goal is to not only have them walk away with what they came in for, obviously, because that was the whole point of their visit, but to also feel good when they left, to say, you know what, they were really helpful. I just felt very comfortable. So we just always, I've always instilled that in my staff too, is just when people come in, if you know them, please welcome them by name, because I want them to feel comfortable. When they come visit us.
I left there and I came home and I said to my wife, I said, boy, did I really like that store. She said, really? I said, they were so nice and it felt so welcoming, and it felt comfortable, and I could look around. I didn't feel pressure. And she's like, wow, that sounds really good. Like, that's, you don't really talk that way.
Good. I like to hear that.
You achieved whatever you set out. If that's what you set out to do, I thought that you had achieved it. But you also indicated that you had some additional focus on staffing the store with knowledgeable women as one of the means to making it more appealing to do-it-yourself women too, right?
Yes. So, and I say we because, I consider my husband a partner, even though he's not always there. He has his own business that he runs. But when we had the idea to open this store, I did a lot of research. I went to other paint stores. I looked around, just, to know what I wanted basically out of a store. And the first thing I said to him was, obviously I'm a woman, and I wanted to take from my own experiences and what I felt going into very male dominating industries.
Right.
So it can be very intimidating, especially for a woman when you're walking in and you don't know anything about paint, let's just say, or, even when you go to like a mechanic and you're scared you're going to get ripped off because you don't know anything about cars. And what if they take advantage of me and I'm not knowledgeable in this area. So, I said to my husband, I want this to be very, again, I'm going to use the word again, comfortable.
Right.
For women primarily. I said, because this is a male dominating industry and I want my store to be very woman friendly and I want it to be pretty because we're women. We like pretty. I don't want it to look like your typical hardware store.
Well, I listen. I liked pretty too. It was pretty, and I liked it, so it was fine. As a man, I still liked it, so that's fine.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, and I thought the staff, like when I went in and I kind of asked my questions, and you said sometimes women feel intimidated. I felt a little like, not at your store, but before, like you kind of go in and you go, I don't want to ask the wrong question. I don't want to look stupid. But I didn't feel that way. Like I said, hey, here's what I did, and can you guys help me out and set me straight?
Right.
So they were incredibly helpful with my questions. They set me on the right path. They either had the answers or they went through great efforts to find them for me.
Yeah.
One of the questions I have for you though, and maybe we'll get into a little bit of advice here.
Okay.
For folks who are thinking about painting, I've always heard, well, there's a better time of year to do it. Is there a better time of year to do that? Does painting turn out better in the spring or in the fall, or what's the truth to that, or what am I looking for?
Well, obviously, if you're going to paint exterior, yes, because paint can only sustain at certain temperatures, right? You don't want to be applying paint in the wintertime. It's not a good idea. But like if you're painting the inside of your house, no, not really. I just think people associate the good weather and having the windows open and the doors open when you're painting inside to spring or fall prior to the cold.
Right.
But obviously for exterior, yes, it does make a difference because you have to have certain temperatures in order to paint outside. Sometimes you have to be aware of the moisture in the air, the weather. If it's going to rain the next day, it's probably not a good idea to paint. So with exterior, it does. Interior, not so much.
So humidity, does humidity come into play with interior at all?
Not really. I mean, you want to make sure nonetheless, most people always want to make sure they have their rooms well ventilated,
yeah.
right? Nobody really wants to have the smell of paint, even though ours is very low VOCs and there's barely any in there. It doesn't really smell like, say, back in the old days when you'd smell it in your house for days.
Right.
But nonetheless, you're going to smell it obviously when you open up the can, you start putting it on the wall, but as it dries, it starts to dissipate.
Now, do different paints take different times to dry? Like, is that, or like this brand, is it a fast drying brand, or?
Yeah, it's relative to the brand. So there's certain paints that we have that can dry in an hour, some that can dry in 2 to 3. We have one paint that's specifically for furniture and like cabinetry, doors, wood, and that's like 16-hour recoat time. So you got to paint like a coat a day, basically.
Wow. See, these are all the little inside sort of things that a person like me who doesn't do it professionally may not know. Let's say I wanted to paint my ceilings, and some are flat and some have the popcorn texture. I've read on some online stores that say never paint your ceilings. Just if they're good, don't touch them, especially if there's popcorn, just don't touch them. Do you think there's truth to that? And if there isn't, is there a difference in the type of paint or rollers and brushes that I might use and I can find at your store if I was going to do ceilings?
So this is where it gets technical because it depends on, again, like you said, whether your ceilings are flat or if they're popcorn. And if they're popcorn, are they already painted or have they not been painted? Oh. So when people tell you not to paint your ceilings, they probably are referring to when it's popcorned, simply because if they are painted, chances are they were painted with an oil-based paint. And what has to happen is it's a nightmare to try and get all of that off. Once you do, your entire ceiling will then still have to be skim coated before you can even go ahead and paint it again. So it's a huge undertaking if your popcorn ceiling is painted and you want to change it to flat.
Right.
If your popcorn ceiling is not painted and you want to change it to flat, it's very easy. It's literally just like misting it with some water.
Yeah.
And it will literally like just crumble and you can just kind of like scrape it off and you're good. And then if your ceilings are flat, of course, you can paint them. You just got to make sure you use a proper ceiling paint because there are like flat paints that people purchase and they think they can get away with just using that on the ceiling. But with that, you'll see streaks on the ceiling. So you just need to make sure you use the proper products along with, like you said, the proper rollers. And yes, we do carry all of that stuff at my store.
Now you talked about a bunch of different scenarios there. I get a little confused because sometimes you pick up the paint bucket and it says one says eggshell and the other one says satin and low satin and you can get it in eggshell, half satin. What does all that mean? Like, for me, I just go, I'm painting a wall. I want to paint a wall. Can you tell me? And then you get into all these questions and can you help make sense of any of that in a few minutes? Like,
I can try. So what we usually do, so those are the sheen level of the paint. So you either have a flat, which is no sheen really. Then it goes up to like an eggshell, then a pearl, and then a satin, a semi-gloss, high gloss. So as you go, it gets higher in sheen. And it gets difficult because some people, like, they'll walk in and they'll say, okay, I want this paint in this color. And I'm like, okay, what brand of paint? They're like, Benjamin Moore. I'm like, yeah, but we have different grades of paint. Oh, okay. And then you have to explain that. And then you're like, okay, what sheen? And they're like, what do you mean, what sheen? So they all think it's just very straightforward. Paint is a little more technical, but again, that's why we're there. We ask all the questions while you're there. We try to figure out what you want, what you're doing, what the situation is now. Like, we always ask questions. What are you painting?
So what if I was painting my kitchen? What would be the sheen? If I'm saying that, the sheen level? Yeah. What sheen level would I pick for a kitchen?
So it depends because there's some people that prefer a higher gloss in their kitchen for washability. I guess they figure it's a kitchen.
Right.
The grease that accumulates on cabinets and walls, food splatter. So the higher the sheen, the little bit easier it's going to be to clean. My personal preference, I just prefer an eggshell, but that's me.
Right.
That doesn't mean everybody else has to do what I want. So it's really preference.
Oh, so there's no hard and fast rule. Hey, you gotta have eggshell, or hey, you gotta have satin. It's really, I mean, there's sensibility in the application, but then you can also say, hey, this is what I'd rather not have this high sort of gloss in my kitchen. I'd rather. Oh, okay. Now, you don't just do paint at Living Young Design. You also have some other services. What are some of the other things that you've got going on?
So, firstly, I have to clarify that the other services we have are not Benjamin Moore related. Okay. Because a lot of people come in and they're like, oh, I didn't know Benjamin Moore does flooring. And we're like, Benjamin Moore doesn't do flooring. So each Benjamin Moore is independently owned. So everybody they can basically sell whatever they want outside of Benjamin Moore products. Again, aside from the paint, we're exclusive to the paint.
Right.
So what we do basically is we try to make it somewhat of a one-stop shop. So we do have flooring. So we have like engineered hardwood, laminate, vinyl, tile, porcelain tile. We have people that can install it as well. We do the which is actually very popular right now, the garage organization, where we can do the epoxy flooring and the the slat wall.
Oh, yeah.
Your hooks, and you can hang bikes, you can hang recycling bins, you can hang all that stuff. So we do a lot of that. We have close relations with contractors and installers for that stuff. So we work with them, and we have access to all that stuff. So we do whatever we can to basically help you with your home improvement project, basically.
That's awesome. It's like you said, it's a one-stop shop. And, garages right now, that seems to be a trend where folks are really spending some time cleaning up the garages. You mentioned the epoxy flooring, which, you can, I know a little bit about that. You can sort of add some flakes and different colors to it, and it gives the floor some durability. It's easy to clean in the winter and things like that. And with the slats on the wall, those are like the pictures in the magazines, right? Where it looks all nice and organized and fancy. And I've seen people even do that to their garages as a workout center, where they convert it.
People do use it, like, even for home offices now, closet organization, like you said, home gyms, like hang your weights. There's a lot of, it's not like that system is not just limited to garages. It's now actually moving into other parts of the home. So I don't like to just refer to it as garage organization. Yeah. It's basically like a home solution for organization, right?
You know what? I never thought of that. You can, I guess those slats, you could put them in your basement even, right? Like if you're doing a workout area, like do an accent wall with, some equipment. And I guess that's why we would go talk to you, Laura.
Yes. We can help you out with anything. And like I said, if we don't have an answer, we'll definitely try and find it for you.
So this has been a very informative session. We've talked about paint. We've talked about organization. You've talked to us about, having opened up during the pandemic and getting to know people and servicing the community. Is there anything that you'd like to leave us with in closing?
Well, just being a resident of Richmond Hill for the last 30 years, I like to support my community where I can and help where I can. So we'd like to offer, I guess, your listeners a discount in our store of 15% if they mention the podcast.
Hey, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, do I qualify too?
Of course.
Hey, Laura, I listened to myself on the podcast. That's awesome. Thank you for doing that. That's so cool.
Exactly.
So there you go, folks. 15% off at Living Young Design. That's great. We're gonna make sure folks know that they have that available to them. Thank you again, Laura, for doing this and for chatting with me and providing the information. Hopefully, maybe we'll have you back again at some point, and we can get some more updates and other things that are going on. Folks, this has been a session with Laura Cavallo from Living Young Design, a Benjamin Moore distributor, and more. Thank you for being with us, Laura, on the podcast.
Thank you.
You've provided insights and information on interior design, along with some painting tips. If you want to know more, call Laura at 905-787-0707. Visit the website at www.ly-design.ca or send an email to info@ly-design.ca. I will have all of those links for folks up in the podcast notes so that you can reference them online as well. Laura, take care, and I can see you on my next project.
You as well. Looking forward to it.
Okay, I am back with musical artist Chase Stevens. Chase is here to talk about the second song. That song is called Another Little Roadside Kiss. But before we get to that, Chase, when we were talking about Even Now, you started talking a little bit about Bob Seger. And there's a little bit of connection there for you with Bob, right?
Yeah, absolutely. The drummer that we had playing on the track at the studio that day was a guy named Greg Morrow, who is Bob Seger's current drummer. He played on his last album and has been touring with him for the last couple of years as well. So it kind of made the recording process a little extra special for me, knowing that we've got one of Bob's band members playing on my track.
That is so cool. In an earlier podcast, I had a session with Anthony Rosano of Anthony Rosano and the Conquerors, who opened for Bob Seger here at ACC a couple of years ago in Toronto. So it's just sort of a full circle thing here as you're telling me that, and it's kind of exciting. So that's so neat to have that. Now, when it comes to this song, your next song here, Another Little Roadside Kiss, tell us a little bit about how that song came to be. Who plays on it? Maybe is there someone behind the lyrics, Chase?
Well, that song came out of the lockdown. I guess I should first say that I love summer. I love when we get into that transitional phase where you step out of your door in the morning and it's not chilly anymore, and you just breathe and you go, oh my God, that feels like it sounds like or it smells like spring, whatever the case is. Yeah. So I love those moments. And just being cooped up last winter, I got thinking about those days, and you're just kind of longing for those days and those moments. And I also love when you do get out into the country and you're driving, and you drive without a destination. It's not where you're trying to get to any particular point or place. You just want to drive. I love those moments. And I love stopping, and doing as I just did out west. You're stopping at all sorts of lookouts and trying to take in as much as you can. So the song really kind of came about from all of that sort of thing.
So, and I got a little bit of that when I watched the video. You have a video for that song. It's available on YouTube. I'll put the link in the podcast notes so that the listeners can check that out. The video looks awesome, and you know what? When you're driving in that car and doing that, and you're in the car, I wanted to be there. So where was that video shot?
We did a little bit of the shooting. If you see me sitting in front of a cabin, that was actually down here in South Mississauga at the Bradley Museum. And there's a little road off of that called Orr Road, which is a tiny little road that takes you about 30 seconds to drive through. But it's all tree canopied, and it's gorgeous in the spring, summer, winter, or fall. It's just a beautiful little stretch of road. So we did a little bit of it there as well. And then we went up to Cavallo, up near Forks of the Credit River. And just before you get into the main part of the town up there, we used some of the back roads to film the rest of it. Beautiful,
beautiful scenery. Listen, including the car in that video, is that like one of is that like a little hot rod car? Is that like, are you a little bit into the hot rods and sort of thing, or?
I love them. I think those sort of cars from that vintage, are, extremely good looking. That was, a 67 Camaro. Nice. And I don't own that car. It was fun to drive for a couple of days, that's for sure.
No, it looked good, and you guys looked like you were having fun in the video. Is there anything else you want to leave us with? Because we're going to get to the song. Is there anything else you want to leave us with?
Well, I had some really good, interesting players on that track as well. Had a lady who did the background vocal on there, Tanya Hancheroff. She's played with Carrie Underwood, Sheryl Crow, Garth Brooks, Luke Bryan, on and on and on. And the guitar player on both those tracks was Troy Lancaster, who is an absolute genius on guitar. So that's one of the reasons why I love recording down in Nashville. People ask me all the time, why do I go down and do all my recording in Nashville? Even during COVID, I was able to record down there. I wasn't personally there, but the band was. We just, zoom in. Technology lets you do that kind of thing these days. But for me to be able to play with musicians of that caliber is so gratifying, and it's just amazing watching how good these people really are. So it's always a pleasure working with those sort of folks.
Listen, thanks for sharing that and for giving us some insights there. You're an amazing talent. I'm so pleased to have you and to be able to share your songs on the podcast. Thank you again for doing that. Let's get to the music. Here is Chase Stevens with a catchy little tune. It's in my library now. I think everybody's going to want this in their library. It's called Another Little Roadside Kiss.
Perfect morning shining through the towering pines. Gypsy wind is blowing that sweet smell of summer across a big old blue sky. There's a little back road that's waiting for you and I. Let's get these wheels moving forward, windows down, music cranked up loud. Winding through the heart of nowhere, skipping every town. You know I'm gonna stop every chance there is for another little long as I have you beside me, I love the view. Let's get these wheels moving forward, windows down, music cranked up loud. Winding through the heart of nowhere, skipping every town. You know I'm gonna stop every chance there is for another little roadside kiss. Slip on a pair of sneakers and come with me. These are the days we live for, let's make it a memory. Let's get these wheels moving forward, windows down, music cranked up loud. Winding through the heart of nowhere, skipping every town. But you know I'm gonna stop every chance there is for another little roadside kiss. Yeah, you know I'm gonna stop every chance there is for another little sunlit roadside kiss.
There you have it, folks. That's Chase Stevens with another little roadside kiss taking us through September. See you in October. Stay safe, everybody, from the Go On with Guido podcast.